All right. Happy Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show. And you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching. We are going to kick things off with our special guest. Really quick, I do want to show you what is the conversation tonight. So the special guest, we will be discussing, obviously, the Middle East. And we're also going to discuss a little bit of domestic issue with the Democratic Party. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we are discussing Professor Richard Wolff, Reform versus Revolution. This is going to be a really good discussion. I can't wait for that one. That's another deep dive that we're doing. We're also going to discuss, if you haven't heard this news, Scotus backs Donald Trump's immigration request. This is a big one. What does this mean for the migrants who had protected status? We're going to get into all of that. Another one I'm going to dive into, we're keeping you up to date on the Diddy trial. It appears that one of the former members of Danity Kane has also testified. And this is the first time that I'm seeing that Usher's name has been mentioned. We'll get into all of that. And do you think Diddy will walk? Answer that poll question, please. Of course, Larry Wilkerson and Garland Nixon are our guests. They will be joining us. And last but not least, we're going to discuss this veto that happened in Maryland from Governor Wes Moore. First and foremost, let's go ahead and bring in our special guest. The first one is Garland Nixon. You've seen him here before, radio host. He also hosts Garland Nixon's show on YouTube. We're also bringing in Larry Wilkerson. He is a retired U.S. colonel. He's the former chief of staff to Colin Powell. Let's go ahead and bring both of them in. What's going on?
Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. So this is the first time I've had both of you on the show at the same time. But I think when it comes to foreign policy, I know you guys may be different a little bit when it comes to political ideology, but I think both of you agree at the state of foreign affairs that the wars have to end, especially at the hands of the U.S. government. So I want to dive in first with the Middle East. There was a recent report, I think it was NBC News that reported this, that apparently Donald Trump or the Trump administration has been talking to Libya to see if they can displace the Palestinian people, the Gazan people, and send them to Libya. And I want to get your perspectives about that. Let's go ahead and we'll just go in order. Let's start with Garland and then we'll go to Larry.
Well, I think it's going to be tough to, transport 1 million people to Libya or anywhere else at this point. I think it would be extremely disruptive. And I find it hard to believe that they'll be able to accomplish that. There's been discussion of moving them to various other countries around the Middle East and the world. But so far, they haven't been able to accomplish that. I do think at this point, it's getting to a point with this starvation issue that it appears to be a faster paced genocide, shall we say. In all reality, if something is not done within the next couple of weeks, it appears that they literally want to kill every Palestinian. And if something's not done, how long can millions or at least, a million and a half people go with no food and water? So it certainly looks like if something isn't done soon, that won't be an issue. There won't be anybody left to move to any other countries.
That's one of the fears as well that I have. Larry, what's your take on this?
Well, I agree with Garland, but I put a military tone to it too. I think Israel has bitten off more than it can possibly chew here. And that's good in some respect, but it's not good for Israel. The morale of the IDF is rock bottom right now, the Israeli Defense Force. The reservists they're calling up, 10 to 20% of them aren't answering the call. They've had to shift PTSD, post-traumatic stress affected soldiers, back into the ranks and deploy them in Gaza. They have 10,000 who've answered the call out of the 100,000 or so that should have answered the call, the new draft call from the ultra-Orthodox. That's not going to go over big in the ranks with either side. And they have a lot of friction amongst their general officers with regard to this, what Netanyahu is calling a sustained military operation in Gaza, which means, as Garland intimated, till every Palestinian is dead or gone. And that's through starvation. It's through bombing and killing. It's outright murder in many cases. And a lot of these people, probably a good 40 to 50% of them, are children or women. And this is raising the hackles now, finally. I'm sad to say this. In the West, there has been an inattention to this that is just appalling. But it is finally raising the hackles even of Starmer in England and Macron in France. David Lammy, the foreign minister, came before the parliament today and excoriated Israel for what it's doing, has suspended their new free trade agreement negotiations with them, and threatened more. And they called in the Israeli ambassador to chide her. So this is long overdue, but finally the West is waking up to the genocide, the brutality, the murder that's going on in Gaza, and to a certain extent in Lebanon and Syria too.
Yeah, and I think part of the corporate media, they've been giving more attention to the starvation in the last couple of days. I've noticed that, but I feel like when this was happening under the Biden administration, they didn't pay as much attention to it. And so, I have my questions about the partisan coverage that I've seen, the way that Gaza has been covered under Biden and the way it's been covered under Donald Trump. Both are complicit. But I think we all cannot forget that this all started under Joe Biden, but this is now Trump's issue. And there's been some back and forth where Donald Trump said at one point the U.S. is going to take over Gaza. Then he said that he's trying to work out a deal with Hamas. It was recently discussed that Hamas said part of that release of Eden Alexander, the deal that was made with Steve Witkoff, was that Israel was going to release the blockade on Gaza. So it's almost as though like Hamas held up their end of the bargain and they did release Eden Alexander, but the blockade was not lifted. I want to get your perspective about this, Garland. Was it the right thing for Hamas to do? Was it the right thing for them to go along with this deal and trusting Steve Witkoff and the Trump administration?
Well, the thing about it, for starters, I don't think it's about, to some extent, it's not about Witkoff and the Trump administration. It is, but it isn't. Here's what I mean. It's not up to them to do it. It's up to the Israeli government to execute it. But it's up to the United States government to put the pressure on the Israeli government and force them to do it. So we know that the Israeli government will not take any action that benefits the Palestinians in any way unless they are forced at the highest, using the highest level of force, just less than anything just less than military force, and it could take that. But the question becomes, will the Trump administration put that level of pressure on them? They will put rhetorical pressure on them, but will they, a little bit of rhetorical pressure on them. But and let me tell you this, it's not Trump's. This is a very American thing now, because we saw it under Biden. We saw it under and we see it under Trump, and it's not like the Democratic Party is coming down on Trump's back for this. I mean, they're mad at him for maybe trying to get a deal in Ukraine. That's about the biggest thing that upsets them. But the Democratic Party is not pressuring the Trump administration. They're not in opposition to what's going on. You hear a rumble or a bumble every now and then, but not much. So I think it's about the Trump administration or the U.S. government having to do something material. We're going to stop giving you this. We're going to stop supplying this. We're going to stop doing something, a material threat, anything short of a material threat. And the Israelis aren't going to listen because they know they don't have to. And because they are an extremist, irrational, morally bankrupt government at this point. And the fallout of what they're doing is, has splashed all over the U.S. government. And I think that even in the midterms, I mean, I'm starting to hear things about various parties. And as soon as Joe Biden got, look on Facebook or anywhere. And when Joe Biden's, it's been revealed that he has cancer. And over again, the comments that I see are about Gaza. They're not about him having they're about caring about him like he cares about people in Gaza, etc. I mean, this situation is permeating the American conscience.
Sabby, can I correct one thing you said? This started with George W. Bush when I was in the State Department. George W. Bush in 2004 called Ariel Sharon, who was then the prime minister of Israel, into his office and essentially told him categorically, the Middle East peace process, the roadmap, two-state solution has failed miserably for 40 plus years. Over to you. And the prime minister was stunned. He was stunned like a deer caught in the headlights. And Bush told him he meant it. It was over to him. From that time on, they have been doing what they're doing right now, piecemeal. In the West Bank, in Jerusalem, in Gaza, piecemeal, a little bit at a time, dispossessing the Palestinians of their land, killing them in many instances, wounding them in others, evacuating their whole families and their whole group of families out of places and settling. What happened on October the 7th was a reaction to that in many respects. A reaction, for example, the 2.5 million Gazans being kept in a concentration camp, an open air concentration camp. Understandable, and under international law, if you're not fulfilling your responsibilities as an occupying power, as Israel wasn't, then you have the right to respond with force. And that's what Hamas did. I'm not trying to excuse what they did on October the 7th, but I'm trying to explain it. And they've been doing it ever since, carte blanche. And the United States, as Garland has indicated, has signed off on that carte blanche. We are as guilty as Israel. And I'm finally seeing some people who are beginning to recognize this, not just in Europe, but also in our own country. The tide is turning, so to speak, with regard to how people think Israel relates to the United States. An asset or a liability? It's getting more and more a liability.
If I may add one other thing too, and is the U.S. government doing anything? Yes, they are. They are literally sanctioning people from the ICC, from the International Criminal Court or International Criminal Court of Justice. I always get get them mixed up. But my point is this: right now, the people who would, to some extent, legally hold the Israeli government accountable under an international law, the government of the United States is sanctioning these people. They're sanctioning their families. They're sanctioning the clerks, the people who, dust the, vacuum the carpet. Anyone that has anything to do with the ICJ or ICC, whichever it is literally being sanctioned. They're running them out of business. So the message to Israel is, keep up the good work. We've got you covered. How could Israel think anything other than that they are fully supported by the government if right now the United States government is providing the ultimate cover in the international legal sphere?
Absolutely. Absolutely the case. I mean, yeah, that's what we're doing.
I go back to Ronald Reagan, and we know that there's Israeli lobby groups that control a lot of the politicians. We all know this. But why is it that Ronald Reagan was able to pick up the phone and tell Israel to stop bombing Lebanon? Why was he able to say, listen, cut it out? Israel's starting to lose support. Americans are seeing this. They're not liking it. Why was he able to do that? AIPAC was still around then.
Well, George H.W. Bush did something even more formidable than Reagan did. After the first Iraq war and the leverage he'd gained over the Israelis by forcing them to stay out of that war, even to the point where he told them if they got into the war, he would divorce the United States from them. He forced them into the Oslo process and into the negotiations that then Bill Clinton ruined, just absolutely ruined, him and Ehud Barak together. They canceled out everything that George H.W. Bush had done. AIPAC got George H.W. Bush defeated. They came in and threw their full weight, money and otherwise, behind Bill Clinton and took it away from George H.W. Bush and got him voted out of office. So he actually did the last really responsible policy change towards Israel. And look what it got him. And no president has had the guts, the courage. Barack Obama didn't have the courage to go up against that power. And that's what has happened since that time. Reagan actually sold F-15s and AWACS to Saudi Arabia, Israel objecting all the way. every president in some way or another since the formation of the state of Israel has had the courage to do something at a time of critical policy to change the venue with regard to Israel until we get to Bill Clinton. And after Bill Clinton, it's Katie barred the door, and George W. Bush, as I said, gave Sharon carte blanche, told him, go ahead and do whatever you need to do. Colin Powell worked with Arafat. We went to Ramallah. We met with Arafat. We tried everything we could to resurrect the Middle East peace process. Every time Powell went out, Dick Cheney, the vice president, cut the tree limb on which Powell crawled out on off. We couldn't do anything. It was over. And Bibi Netanyahu just came in and picked up on that and ran with it full steam ahead. And October the 7th, which I think Bibi had something to do with, I think Bibi was complicit in October the 7th, gave him the same kind of imprimatur that 9/11 gave us. In other words, everything was okay after that.
What do you mean? Well, go ahead, Garland, and then we got to come back to that. The point there you made about Netanyahu possibly having something to do with October 7th. But go ahead, Garland.
You know, I think in a way, sometimes I feel like we're asking the wrong question. You know, if I give someone a gun and the bullets and they're shooting innocent people, right? And then the cops come and say, where was that guy? And I provide an alibi. Oh, he was at my house. He couldn't have possibly committed the murder. I pay for the person's lawyer. I go to court. Well, somebody else knows too much, and they're one of the witnesses that saw it. I rub out the witness form. At what point do you say Garland's should tell the murderer to stop doing whatever they're doing, or Garland is an accomplice? Garland and that person are creating a crime. If not for Garland giving the weapon, providing the bullets, lying and providing an alibi, providing the person for a lawyer, at what that time do we go from I should be asking that person to stop to we are a team committing a crime and we should be held equally accountable? I think that's where we're. I think this business about asking why we should or shouldn't stop doing something. We're providing the bunker buster bombs, sanctioning the people in court who are trying to hold them accountable. You know, and sending them more money and doing everything we can to help them, providing media coverage that is unthinkable at times, where you read these articles and you see 10 Israelis were killed, and then 1,000 Palestinians died as if they all slipped on a banana peel and you know, broke their necks accidentally. At what point is there, do we have to say we're looking at accomplices in a crime and the issue of accountability should be equal amongst all of the accomplices?
That's a really good point there, Garland. Now, to this point Larry made here about Bibi possibly being involved with October 7th, are you referring to the New York Times article that said that Israel, the IDF, found out that this was planned a year and a half prior to the event?
That's part of it, but in a minimal case of guilt on the part of Bibi, minimal case, he was paying through Qatar. He was paying Hamas. Why was he paying Hamas? Why was he supporting Hamas? Very simple, because Hamas was against a two-state solution, just like Bibi is against a two-state solution, whereas Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinian Authority were for a two-state solution. So he was supporting Hamas with money, with Qatari money, and I think too with Israeli money. Read our money coming to Israel from our taxpayers. He was supporting them because he wanted them to win out in terms of the competition between the PA, Mahmoud Abbas's organization, and Hamas. And on the other side, that's the light guilt. The heavy guilt is that perhaps he was even in there not knowledgeable about what was going to happen on October the 7th and failed to warn people, failed to send the message out because he wanted it to happen. He had seen what 9/11 did to energize the empire, and he loved it, and he wanted to do some of the same, and he wanted to do it in Gaza. So he let it happen.
And that leads me to this clip here, because this is damning if I haven't seen anything as damning. Shout out to Hotspot for this clip. This is former Israeli MK Moshe Feiglin says the quiet part out loud on Channel 14, suggesting Israel needs to conquer and colonize Gaza until there isn't a single Gazan child left. Everyone, check this out. You'll have to read the captions here.
ואני אומר לך יותר מזה, כל ילד, כל תינוק בעזה הוא אויב. האויב הוא לא החמאס, והוא גם לא הזרוע הצבאית של החמאס, כמו שהפצ"רית שלנו מספרת לנו שאסור לנו לפגוע בחמאסניק, אלא אם כן הוא חלק מהזרוע הצבאית. כל ילד בעזה הוא האויב. אנחנו צריכים לכבוש את עזה וליישבה, ושלא יישאר שם ילד עזתי אחד. אין ניצחון אחר.
So he basically said there that Hamas is not, you know, the target or the enemy, and said that he said every child in Gaza. And this is just open rhetoric here that it's obvious what they're trying to do. And no, it just, I gotta ask, I'm going to you, Garland, where is the rest of the Arab world? Why is Egypt so timid? I understand they have a close relationship with the U.S., but still, at some point, I think people have to understand, and Abby Martin said this earlier on Status Quo. Abby Martin said people need to understand that it starts with the Palestinians, but it doesn't end with the Palestinians. And this involves surveillance. This involves, you know, statements that Netanyahu has made where he says we're going to go in next and liberate Africa. Like, why would all the other Arab countries, why would they feel that they're safe and that Israel wouldn't try to do this to them?
A couple of quick things. I think number one, I wouldn't even call it the quiet part. Let's not forget at the very beginning, Benjamin Netanyahu was referring to the Old Testament story of Amalek. So it was these people are the Amaleks, which an old story of ethnic cleansing and genocide. From the very beginning, there has been outlandish statements, unabashed, allusions to genocide. There have been terrible, we could go many places where there's been, to be quite frank, far more people in genocides killed than this, right? But the interesting thing about this is the openness with which the Israeli government spouts genocidal rhetoric, the brazenness which they do it, and the reality that they feel confident that they can do it because they know they have Uncle Sam behind them. And as I said, look what's happening right now with the courts being sanctioned by the United States. So they've been doing this all along, and I think that's one of the things, one of the many things that really outrages people. Sadly, when it comes to a number of these governments in the Middle East, they are so highly compromised by the West. We're talking, some of these that that were literally put in place by the U.S. or more often than not in MI6. I mean, look at Pakistan, the so-called leader of Pakistan. The difference this time with Imran Khan was he got put in jail. Normally they just get assassinated, and this guy that was living in the suburbs of London is now the prime minister, or whatever term you want to call whoever speaks for the army of Pakistan right now. And if you look throughout the Middle East, what you have is not really governments. They are not even really monarchies, because it's not like some bloodline going way back to a family 500 years ago or something. It's literally these people, their governments go back to when the lines were drawn by the British and they were put in power. So basically what you have is the echoes of colonialism, where you have a bunch of families that were put in power by the Brits or the CIA or whoever, and they're just going along with their Western masters. It's a sad state of affairs. But bottom line is, we see the opposite of democracy. We see the opposite of representative government, when all of the people on the street feel one way, and the monarchs who are just going to give us a $400 million plane or something like that are in power.
Your point here, Larry, about the other Arab countries. Recently, Donald Trump was in the Middle East, and he met with Saudi Arabia. Directly prior to that meeting, there was a conversation with a Saudi Arabian editor on the BBC News, where he said that Netanyahu's going to have to get past this. There's too many deaths. There's too many killings. Donald Trump said recently in an interview on Fox News that there's 1.9 million people left in Gaza. It was estimated that there was 2.2 to 2.3 million, which makes the number a lot higher than what they've been reporting, which is what some of us were saying earlier on, that they were underreporting the deaths. What do you think is going to happen there with country like Saudi Arabia that the U.S. desperately needs? Why doesn't Saudi Arabia take a stand here and say, listen, you're going to have to stop, starving people in Gaza, in the blockade, et cetera, if you want to continue doing business with us? Why? I just feel like people just don't care.
I think you're right there. Mohammed bin Salman, Mohammed bin Zayed in UAE, they don't care. They only care if it affects their royal constituency and their plans for the future. Now, as Donald Trump, I think, has detected one of the few positive things he's done, I don't know if he's going to turn it into a positive thing ultimately, but he's detected that there is some angst about where that might go. The angst is over the Abraham Accords. They are saying Israel will be out of any compilation of those accords and any forward movement of those accords because they're not happy with Israel. They put in there the proviso that there has to be a Palestinian state and a proposal, therefore, that's reasonable before they'll let Israel back in. They know that's preposterous. There's not going to be any such thing, not with Netanyahu in charge anyway. So they're playing a game right now, trying to bring the United States into bear where they thought the United States was evacuating the area. And Saudi Arabia in particular wants nuclear power and wants a nuclear capability and wants to be a latent nuclear power, weapon power, the way Iran is headed right now, in case Iran gets a nuclear weapon. So this is all a big game about who's going to be the factotum in the Middle East, principally because they I think, rightfully ascertain that Donald Trump and probably any future president is going to reduce the U.S. presence there considerably because we're in such colossal debt right now and such extreme straits in terms of the real enemy that might be out there, China, that we can't do anything about it. We're caught in the Middle East. And this is another place where I differ with people like John Mearsheimer who say that it's the Jewish lobby, it's the Israel lobby, it's the lobby, it's AIPAC and so forth. Israel's doing our work. They're doing our work for us. They've been doing our work for us since 1948 when the British finally abandoned their attempt to keep their empire together and we took it over. Israel is doing the U.S. work. Lindsey Graham said it on the floor of the Senate. Why are you objecting to them killing these Gazans? Why are you objecting to them killing Palestinian Arabs? If they weren't killing them, we'd have to be. That's almost a direct quote from Lindsey Graham. He told the truth. They are acting in our capacity. And Trump has finally figured out, I think, some of that. And he's also figured out that it might not be the most positive action in our capacity. It might not be strategic in any way at all, unless he's looking for the demise of the empire. So I don't know how this is going to resolve itself, but I tell you this right now, I don't think Israel is long for this world as a state conceived as it was conceived in 1948.
And if I may say, and we may unfortunately be saying the same thing about the United States, that the United States may not be what it was a few years ago as Israel. Not only does Israel become a pariah state, but I think we're well on the way to that. And I would disagree as far as China being the enemy for this reason. If I look at the United States moral position and I say, look, right now we are literally supporting people who are goose stepping around with Hitler tattoos all over them in one country. In another country, we're literally not supporting committing a genocide. It's hard for me to say that the United States has the moral stance to point to any other country and say that country is our enemy. Right now, we are at the bottom of the moral battle in the United States, barrel. And right now, the United States, as far as I'm concerned, should be looking at China saying, we apologize for ever saying a bad word to you. We should try to morally emulate you. We should try to morally emulate any country in the world, because right now we are so morally deficient and defective. And I understand what Larry's saying. Could we say that China is a economic competitor? Fair enough, they're an economic competitor. But as far as I just think the United States is not in a position to even write the word enemy down and point to another country, because that kind of implies that you have a moral or maybe some kind of a political or economic advantage that you can give them advice. And right now, our economy is garbage, and we're up to we're up to our neck in debt, and the only thing we can think about doing is more tax cuts and increasing the Pentagon budget, which is two of the things that got us there in the first place. And we're addicted to two wars, countries that are run by lunatics that we keep in power, and we will not force them to do the right thing. I think the United States right now should be looking at any country in the world saying, please give us some moral advice, because we are the bad guys right now.
I don't disagree with any of that. I don't disagree with any of it. I do think that people like Mearsheimer are right in that rising power, sinking power, and we are definitely, as you just said, a sinking power, has sort of a gravitation towards conflict in human history over the last 5,000 years. And I think we can avoid that. But right now, with the leadership we've had for the last 20 years, I'm not sure we can avoid it, because that leadership is so inept that we may wind up in a struggle with China that turns military, and we're going to lose. We're going to lose big time.
We lost to the Houthis. We cannot confront the Houthis, and to lose to a naval battle to a country that literally does not have a navy at that point. You kind of got to pack it in. The bottom line is, though, we're taking on water. You know what I mean? We're like, that country over there is doing this or that. We're doing that. And we're like, hold on. We're taking on water. Perhaps we should pump the water out of our bilge before we talk about anyone else. I'm in the boating. But that's where we're taking on water so fast. And we just keep doing it's just unbelievable to watch this country spiral out of control.
And you're absolutely right about the debt. The debt is just staggering. I mean, CBO just released a report saying that by mid-century, which isn't very far away, we're going to be $50 trillion in aggregate debt, and the interest payments are going to consume the entire federal budget.
Well, I think that one of the questions people always ask is because people feel so helpless, particularly when it comes to Gaza, what can they do? There is an organization, and we had them on RBN. They're called Taxpayers Against Genocide. And basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to sue U.S. taxpayers filed historic legal complaint in D.C. on May 14th. So this was recent, charging the U.S. government with complicity in genocide. And what they are arguing is that they did not agree to have their taxpayer, dollars go towards this genocide in Gaza. And that's another thing I'm wondering too, and Eric, you can share this link with people in the chat so they can join the coalition if they want to. I really think this is the way to go about it. I think people need to start suing people. I feel like the only thing our government understands is money. So I think this organization here, Taxpayers Against Genocide, I think this is the right direction to give people something to do, because that's the thing. And Larry, I want to get your take about this. What are conservatives saying? Because it seems like there does seem to be a split among some of the Trump supporters, where some are saying, no. I don't co-sign what's happening in Gaza. And then there are some that are saying they agree with it because it's biblical, et cetera. I would argue about it being biblical. And I grew up in the church, but I would argue about that. But what are they? What are you hearing from the conservative community about what's happening in Gaza right now?
Well, let me make a remark about your biblical connotations. I was talking to my daughter today, and I was talking to her about Pontius Pilate and the Roman Empire. And I was talking to her about King Herod and Jesus Christ and his crucifixion. And I said, we forget the Romans didn't like those obstreperous people down there. They didn't like them at all. And they wanted them to just keep quiet. They could have their temple, they could have their religion and so forth, but just keep quiet. So Pontius Pilate, like the proconsul, is forced by who? To crucify this man that he knew was not guilty of any crime recognized by the Roman Empire. And one thing you got to face about the Roman Empire, its laws were sacrosanct to it. And if you were a Roman citizen, you knew no matter where you were in the empire, you were protected by Roman law. Now that deteriorated over time, just as it is here. But nonetheless, at that time, it was pretty much in effect. So here he is having to crucify this innocent man because who wanted him crucified? The leaders of the Jewish community. We forget that. And I'm not trying to say that Jews are guilty for the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, but the Jews are guilty of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. The Romans wanted nothing to do with it. Now, fast forward to the present situation where, as Garland said, Bibi thinks he's Joshua with the trumpet behind him. And he's going to slaughter all the people out there to biblical proportions. And you got Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and others who are saying things like this all the time. They're going to kill everybody. They will not be satisfied until every Palestinian is out, gone, and no more trouble, or dead. And they prefer the dead because they know you don't come back from that. It reminds me of Bosnia-Herzegovina when the UN peacekeepers were there. And one of them was telling me about a sniper that he had apprehended on the streets of Sarajevo. And he was questioning him after he'd apprehended him and asked him, because he'd seen him do it, why did you shoot that 12-year-old boy crossing the street in Sarajevo? Why did you shoot him? And the guy looked at him, a Serb, and he said, because he grew up to be a terrorist. Well, that's why Bibi, that's how he justifies, and that's how Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and the rest of that ultra-right wing justify killing all these women, children, because that's mows the garden, that mows the grass, that keeps any terrorists from growing up to become terrorists. And that's the way they look at it. This is unconscionable. We haven't had this really since Hitler. And if you look at the reversal of roles here, look at Warsaw and the ghettos, for example, and what the Nazis did there. And then you look at what Netanyahu is doing now. What you have is the oppressed has turned into the oppressor and is trying to outdo the previous oppressor with regard to that little small place that's no bigger than London, Gaza, trying to kill them all. This is unconscionable. I agree with Garland 100%. We are complicit in this. As Gideon Levy has said, every bomb that drops off that U.S. supplied F-16 is the U.S. saying, go down there and kill people. That's the U.S. That's our complicity in it. And I go back to my previous statement. I think we're using Israel more than Israel's using us. And I think they're doing what we want them to do. We do not like those people. We do not think those people are conducive to our role in the Middle East, in Southwest Asia. So we want them dead. Lindsey Graham spoke the truth. We want them dead. That's got to stop. That's got to stop, because that, just like the state-sponsored torture program in George W. Bush administration, is making us a global pariah, along with Israel.
Yeah, and the other thing from the religious perspective, meanwhile, back in America, you've got these Christians, all manner of Christians, not just Christian conservatives, who believe this has to happen. Why? So that all these biblical prophecies can come back, and then the Jews can so the Jews have to commit first of all, the Jews, they literally believe this, the Jewish people in Israel have to commit a genocide, right? They got to kill all of these people. Then the return of Christ will come, and then the Jews will have to make a decision. This is all brings back this is all the return of Christ, right? Then the Jews have to make a decision whether or not they're going to be Christians or Jews. And if they choose not to be Christians, it's their turn. Then they get genocided. And then after all of that happens, we get the return of who? The Prince of Peace.
Right. And
that's what's coming back. All of this to bring back the Prince of Peace. Yeah. It's absurd to watch it. In the end, all you get is a bunch of murderous lunatics with excuses to kill other people. You're killing them because they're communists. You're killing them because they're Russians in Ukraine, or you're killing them because they're Jews, or it's the same thing with different rhetoric to accomplish something. It's unthinkable. I mean, it's just it makes you lose faith. It's a struggle, as a person, because it makes you lose faith in humanity at times. It's a struggle to keep faith in humanity.
Just to reinforce what Garland just said, I remember vividly when Tom DeLay, the Hammer from Houston, Texas, was in a Christians United for Israel conference with John Hagee, the pastor who's in charge of it up there. That year, they had given $300 million US to West Bank settlers. And Max Blumenthal asked Hagee from the audience a question that caught Hagee completely off guard. He says, what's going to happen to the Jews when Christ descends with his flaming sword? Is he going to kill them all? And so what do you do in Christians United for Israel if he's going to kill them all? And Hagee thought for a second, and then he said, no, they'll convert. Right. And then they went out in the corridor, and Max asked Tom DeLay the same question. And he said, oh, yeah, he's right. Of course they'll convert. All of them will convert? Well, most of them will. Well, Jesus is going to kill all the others, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, all the unbelievers will be killed. This is preposterous. This is preposterous.
And this is our coalition. This is the coalition. These are the people that are working together who are like, okay, let's work together and get this done. Well, that happens. Well, then you get killed. Oh, well, great. Let's work together.
Each thinks the other's myth is bull. That's what it is. Each thinks the other's myth is bull. And so they're willing to use each other.
Very, very crazy and wild. I want to pivot to domestic policy because this story is all over the news right now. I'm sure you guys are aware. So it was announced that Joe Biden has been diagnosed with cancer. I want you to hear what this doctor said here on Morning Joe. And it's an aggressive form of cancer for those who are not aware, but I think everybody's aware of this by now. Aggressive form of prostate cancer. Everyone check this out.
You're an oncologist, obviously incredibly respected. You believe that it is likely, just for those just tuning in, you believe it is likely if this prostate cancer has spread to the bone that he could have had it for up to a decade, but certainly it's likely. Would it be fair to say it's likely to have had this for at least several years?
Oh, more than several years. You don't get prostate cancer.
So I just want to stop you. So this is not speculation. If you have prostate cancer that is spread to the bone, then he's most certainly, you were saying, had it when he was president of the United States.
Oh, yeah. He did not develop it in the last 100, 200 days. He had it while he was president. He probably had it at the start of his presidency in 2021. Yes, that I don't think there's any disagreement about that.
So my question is, the president of the United States has his own doctor. I would say gold-plated, healthcare compared to the rest of us. Like, he is getting the top-notch care there. Why would Joe Biden forego this exam, Garland?
I don't think he foregoed it. Let me just say this. I lost a brother about a year ago to prostate cancer that had gone into the bone. And he'd had it. I talked to the doctor, and my brother was one of these guys. I'm fine. I haven't been to the doctors in 10 years. Starts getting pain in the back, prostate cancer. He's dead in a year, right? And I talked to the doctor extensively. And you know what they said? He's probably had it for 10 years. That's what the doctor told me about my brother before he died. Probably had it for 10 years, right? Let's keep in mind, and I'm an older, middle-aged guy, whatever you want to call it. Every year, I go get a test, and they take this little PSA thing, and they give you your numbers, and I'm always waiting for the numbers. Oh, my gosh. Or, it's, that's what guys my age do. Hopefully. So you take these numbers every year. He's getting an extensive, as the president, probably, maybe even as a senator, whatever the case, vice president, he's getting these tests extensively every year. They absolutely knew what his PSA numbers were. He's had it for a while. There's no question about it. And now all of this discussion about, dementia, the question is, was he being treated? Was he getting some type of chemical treatment that could have affected that, his cognitive abilities, etc. So at a time when finally all of these Democrats start coming out saying, well, I guess in hindsight, we should have said something. It was a mistake. We find that they were hiding God only knows what. This probably isn't even the end of it. It's like we keep talking about this country, and it's like we look at the debt, we look at politics, and we're just guys like Larry and I who've been around for a lot of years are like, what the hell's going on here? I guess the crazies, his Secretary of State, Blinken and Sullivan. No wonder they were firing attackums into Russia. I guess Blinken and Sullivan, those lunatic sociopaths, must have been completely running foreign policy.
I think that's absolutely true.
Let me add this part too. Then I'll go to you, Larry. So this is something that people need to see. Back in 2019, Biden was diagnosed with benign enlargement of the prostate, or BPH. That December, his campaign released his medical evaluation, which noted this patient has been treated for BPH. This was initially treated with medication and was then definitely treated with surgery. He has never had prostate cancer. So that was the statement that was given from his team. So if that was an issue in 2019, again, because what they're saying now is that, yes, the president has a physical, but he wasn't having that specific exam. To me, that doesn't make sense. If you had that condition, BPH in 2019, which is actually right before the election, want to remind everybody, and they said that he's had surgery, why all of a sudden would they stop doing that exam? Larry, is the Democratic Party in trouble?
I think so, but for a lot more than just that. They have no clue. Organizationally, policy-wise, strategy-wise, they have no clue. Let me just say that my wife died of pancreatic cancer 55 days from diagnosis to death. And I would say categorically that the cancer industry in America is for money, not for cure. Money, not for cure. There are various ways they could have developed their research over the last 30 years in particular, with lots of money coming in from the Congress to make that a different situation. But they didn't, because they don't want to damage this cash flow. Cancer creates the greatest cash flow in American medicine. They're not about to disturb it. Now, that's not a comment on Biden so much as it is a comment on the medical industry in the United States. But it is indirectly a comment on Biden, and here's what I mean by that. We've had this discussion amongst military doctors for a long time, about 30 years. We had it when Powell was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. We definitely need some sort of council of physicians who are trusted physicians, if you can find them, that determines whether or not a president every year of his terms or term is competent, medically speaking. And we need it divorced from people like Blinken and Sullivan, who don't want to surrender that power. And so we're going to prop the guy up for as long as they can, even if he's a walking dead man. And in the last year of Reagan's 8 years, that was the case too. I've had Secret Service agents tell me they'd walk in his room and say, Mr. President, you ready for the meeting? And he would look at him and say, what meeting? Because he was lost too in the creeping dementia. We need something, some kind of council that determines, independent of the cabinet, whether or not the president is medically, psychologically competent to continue in service, especially if they're over 70. We don't have that. So we're going to have more of this. We're going to have people who are really not running the country. Their cabinet is unelected cabinet.
So that's another thing I wanted to bring up as well. There's also Jake Tapper apparently was just on Megyn Kelly's show. He's going on this tour. There was another book that was written by two other journalists about what happened with Joe Biden behind the scenes. I have to tell you, in my entire life, I've never seen this. And I don't know if either of you have. It almost feels like there is this coordinated attempt here to, I don't know if they're trying to run cover for Kamala's loss or if they're trying to run cover for the fact that Trump just happened to win again. I don't know what it is. But what is this whole coordinated effort now from Jake Tapper and other commentators that were defending and supporting Joe Biden throughout his presidential, term? Everybody's on this rampage now of, oh my God, guess what was really happening behind the scenes? Why are they doing this now, Garland?
There's something that, as you know, my background is investigator in law enforcement. There's a term in the legal community known as a creeping admission, right? The creeping admission is, I'm only going to say as much as you know. So I say, no, I wasn't at the crime scene. And you say, well, we've got a picture of you right here at the crime scene. Okay, I was, but I didn't even know the guy. Well, we've got a picture of text. Here's the text where you texted him everything. Okay, maybe I texted him, but I didn't kill him. I'm only going to admit as much as you can prove. And that's what they're doing right now. Now that it's been proven, they had a time to think, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? It's been proven. We'll admit it and act as though we're coming out of our own impetus. We're just coming out because it's the right thing to do. I also think this. They want to do it now to get it out of the way because the midterms is a long way off. And they don't want to get pounded in the head with it when the midterms come, because they know that's coming by the Republicans. And some people, it's going to hurt their credibility, because all of these people come midterms are going to revert back to the same thing. Vote for us. Why? Because Trump's a bad guy and he loves Putin or something like that. They'll just revert to what they have. And I think they're trying to clean out the closet, get the dirt done away with. Anything you might attack us for, let's get that out of the way. That way, when we start setting for the midterms, we can just go the old Trump loves Putin and he's a Nazi or something crazy like that. And they can completely divorce themselves from any discussion of policy again.
Larry, what's your take on this? Have you seen anything like this before?
Periodically, yeah. I've been on this earth for 81 years. So I got to tell you, I think a lot of it, well, look at you. You got a podcast like a lot of other people now. You are a place where Americans can find the truth. The mainstream media is where Americans find obfuscation, cover up, lies, shills for the administration, Democrat or Republican. And let me give you an example. When I came out of the Bush administration, I was very critical of the Bush administration, which I just served. MSNBC, everybody wanted me. I was on every show you can imagine. Once Biden got elected, and I campaigned for Biden, I helped Biden get elected a little bit. I did a little bit. I did all I could. They didn't want me anymore when I started criticizing Biden. I couldn't get on because they were defending, not Biden, Obama. I couldn't get on because, I was actually I went after Obama for Libya, for example, and that's it. No more mainstream. I had to go to the alternative media. That's what the mainstream media does now. It shills for the government because it gets money and power from the government. You get people who get into the White House to ask questions. Ooh, that's a big privilege. You do something to end that privilege, you're no longer the big guy on the block or the big gal on the block. So that's why Americans have turned. Judge Napolitano has more listeners now than CNN.
Yeah, he does.
He has more listeners than CNN. And it's because Americans have figured it out. You don't read the New York Times. You don't read the Washington Post. You don't watch Joe. You watch alternative media like yours, and you get kernels of truth. And that's a sad commentary on our mainstream media, but it is. I think it's accurate.
Sabby, I remember when I think it was under Trump the first time when they dropped the mother of all bombs in Afghanistan, right? And there was this press conference or whatever for in the Washington Post about it, and there were people who sent people there and talked to people who lived in the area and got a different story than they got from the government. The Washington Post put this article out. People were asking the writer, where did you get from what we found? The people did investigations. They talked to people that lived in the area and they said different. Where did you get that information? And she finally admitted from a Pentagon press release. She took a Pentagon press release and wrote an article based on that. So what you have that appears to be made, it doesn't even appear much to be media anymore, is what you have is the purveyors of the narrative and narrative control. When the government says something, they say, oh, this is true. And it's if the Pentagon just released a press release, you look at it and say, oh, that's a Pentagon press release, I better question it. But when they filter it through the Washington Post, you don't think it's a Pentagon press release anymore. So you say, well, now there we go. We've got this but it really is always a Pentagon press release or, an intelligence press release or something. That's the idea now, to disguise it and filter it out and make it look like it's media when it's just narrative control.
I got to say that I was part of the team that helped do that when I was working for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. We decided we were going to take over the media. I'm telling you the truth. We decided we were going to twist the media around our finger, and we did it in the first Gulf War. We gave the message to the media, and they ran with it. And ever since then, they've been doing it just like Garland said.
One more question for both of you. Butch Ware said this after Kamala lost. He said that the Democratic Party is done. And what we're seeing is, obviously there are some people still trying to reform the Democratic Party. I don't think that can be done, obviously, because of big money interests. And we all saw what they did to Bernie Sanders. But what do you think is going to happen to the Democratic Party from here? We saw someone like Kamala Harris try to align herself with Liz Cheney and even Dick Cheney, of all people, did not work for her. You would think the obvious answer would be, okay, go in the other direction. But the donors don't want them to do that. What happens now, especially since I just looked at the new numbers? Donald Trump's approval rating is starting to increase again. So what happens, Garland?
I'll say one thing that's interesting about the numbers recently is normally what happens is, each party has its core base, and then the independents will kind of move, and you'd see Donald Trump's numbers go down, the Democrats would go up, the Democrats will go down, Donald Trump goes up. But I've been watching them early, the first couple of months, when Donald's numbers started going down, the Democrats were still going down. He was going down. They were scoring. There's nothing pulling them back up at this point, and they're not. Nobody has any confidence in them because the party is lost. I don't even really think it's a political party as we traditionally knew it anymore. And here's one of the reasons. In 2028, what somebody asked me, what would the Democrats have to do? I said something they can't possibly do. They would have to have an honest and open primary and allow the people to pick the person who they wanted, and you know what? They'd have a chance. But all of the corruption, all of the people, I mean, if you talk to the insiders, the people who are getting money, all these, it's just a basket of corruption. It's not really a party. So they can't. Literally, they cannot have a primary and allow their constituents to choose the presidential nominee, which means they don't even, their constituents are a small group of donors. So I don't see how they will be interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the midterms, but that's a long ways off the way things are going.
Yeah, Larry.
Well, I agree. I don't see how they're going to salvage themselves. I compare it to the period post-Civil War, when the Republicans, who had been in obscurity till Lincoln took the presidency, and then sort of prevailed for a long time thereafter for obvious reasons. And the Democrats had a hard time picking even though they had war Democrats and they had against the war Democrats. I mean, there were two parts of the Democratic Party at that time. They had a hard time getting themselves back together again. So it's not impossible that they could, but I agree with Garland. I think it's going to be a really tough road to hoe, and we need to get rid of this primary process. We just need to get rid of it entirely. We need to I'd go back to this old dark room with cigar smoking men and women now, figuring out who's going to be the best candidate. We did a better job of it then than we do now with this crazy system we have that's dominated, as Garland said, by the billionaires and by the people who want whomever they want to get elected and usually succeed in that process. I don't know how we get out of that. I just don't, because money runs everything now in this country. It runs everything. Certainly it runs politics.
I'll say this. They put forth Kamala Harris as the nominee, and then said she was competent and smart and all this. She is one of the she's the worst politician. I'm not even going to call her a politician. She's I mean, I'm not going to, really, use any pejorative terms, but it was an abomination that they would put Kamala Harris. She could not answer a simple question. I sat there and I'm like, and then they told us she's brilliant, she's smart, she's everything. And she would just sit there and just use the same old hackneyed cliches over and over. Oprah's sitting there like looking around like, oh my God, what the hell am I going to please get off the stage? And I'm like, you're going to put this person forward and then tell us that you're a legitimate party. I'm sorry, no legitimate party puts Kamala Harris forth as the presidential primary. I mean, as nominee.
That's what the billionaires want. They want someone who's got prostate cancer in the fourth stage, or they want someone who's dumber than mud because they want to run the country.
Oh my gosh. Garland and Larry, thank you. Thank you both so much. Where can people go to, Garland, where can people go to find your work?
I got my YouTube channel, and I'm also on Rumble and Rockfin.
Larry?
Eisenhower Media Network. Ben Cohen, our supporter, just was arrested in the Congress.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, guys. Thank you. All right, guys. That was Garland Nixon and Larry Wilkerson. It was great to have both of them on at the same time. Interesting conversation. We have quite a bit to discuss tonight. Tonight's theme is the system is fixed. And I'm trying to get myself to stop saying a system is broken. The system we have in this country is fixed. And we'll get into a little bit more about that as we get into the stories. First and foremost, let's go ahead and give a shout out to patrons. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate you, fam. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories. Ultimate, Sabinators. There are Sabsters as well. Don't forget about the Sabbies. And we also have a group called Members. All of their names are listed here. And you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. Based. All right, let's go to some of the comments and then we will get to other stories. Let's give a shout out to Arnold Turner for becoming a Sabby member. Give Arnold a big whoop whoop. And let's give a shout out to Iceland. Oh, honey, I hope I don't mess up your name. Iceland City. Let's give a shout out to Iceland as well. Whoop, whoop. Thank you, Marlon. Unfortunately, they have to leave or be unalived, and they would rather unalive them. Thank you, Roger. Though I know OPEC caused the 1970s inflation, what I didn't know and just learned is that it was because Saudis put sanctions on Israel over Yom Kippur War. Interesting. I didn't know about that either. Thank you, Marlon. Garland Nixon for president. Thanks, Roger. Ask Larry opinion on TRICARE compared to the rest. I'm sorry I didn't see this, Roger. I'll ask him next time. TRICARE health insurance. And thank you, Marlon. Term limits for Congress and the Senate. No presidential candidates over the age of 64. I can get with that. I think that's a good idea, Marlon. Marlon comes up with good ideas on calling too. So thank you guys so much. Okay, guys, if you haven't done so, smash the like. Thank you very much. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share, just like a Care Bear. And ladies and gentlemen, we are diving into our next story. This is a big one. This one's about immigration, ladies and gentlemen. Again, the theme is the system is fixed. We are not going to say on this show anymore that the system is broken, right? The system is fixed. It has just been announced that the Supreme Court has decided to back Donald Trump's demand to end protective status for the Venezuelan migrants. This is causing a stir among some because they're asking, well, isn't this the same Supreme Court that said that Abrego, the Maryland guy who was sent to the El Salvadorian prison, weren't they the same ones that said he has to be able to come back and face due process? And then others are saying, well, what the Supreme Court is doing right now is considered due process. Let's go ahead and get into this clip here. This could really change some things, ladies and gentlemen. Scotus allows the White House to end protections for, this is going to be 350,000 Venezuelan migrants. Listen to this.
The Supreme Court allowing the White House to remove temporary protected status that was granted in 2023 for some 350,000 people from Venezuela living here in the U.S. Senior political correspondent Rachel Scott has the latest. And Rachel, we know this pending appeal of the case, this could pave the way for deportations. Good morning.
Good morning, Robin. It could. And this decision by the Supreme Court will impact many migrants who were allowed to live and work in the United States for humanitarian reasons. The Supreme Court ruling that the Trump administration can cancel temporary protections for up to 350,000 Venezuelans. This is a policy that was put in place by former President Joe Biden, citing the political instability in the country. The Trump administration calling it exploitation. In an emergency request, they asked the Supreme Court to weigh in. The decision was swift but not extensive. The justices did not explain their ruling. Immigration advocates warn this will send migrants back to dangerous living conditions, but the Trump administration is calling this a win. And they have also asked the Supreme Court to end similar humanitarian protections for thousands of immigrants from Cuba to Haiti. That could set the stage for possible large-scale deportations, Robin.
It could do that. Okay, Rachel. And the president is heading to Capitol Hill today to rally his party around his new spending bill. What more can you tell us about that?
Yes.
Yeah, and then they get into the conversation there about Donald Trump trying to get the GOP Congress members on board with that spending bill that we covered the other day. So Donald Trump now has the backing from the Supreme Court. He's not out there on his own anymore. I think the vote was 7-9. I have to double check. I think it said 7-9 for this. And this is going to be a doozy. This is something that Trump's base did advocate for, and they did want. Let's get into the details a little bit more here. The Supreme Court lets Trump lift deportation protections for Venezuelans. Now, a federal judge had blocked the administration's plan to remove the temporary protected status of more than 300,000 immigrants. Check it out, ladies and gentlemen. Check it out. SCOTUS on Monday let the Trump administration, for now, remove protections from nearly 350,000 Venezuelan immigrants who had been allowed to remain in the U.S. without risk of deportation under a program known as temporary protected status. The court's brief order was unsigned and gave no reasons, which is typical when justices rule on emergency applications. Now, in this one here, they said no vote count was listed, but I thought I saw somewhere else it was 7-9. It says that Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson noticed that she would have denied the administration's request. Justices announced they would allow the Trump administration to end the protections pending appeal of the case, potentially allowing the administration to move ahead with deportations. The justices also appeared to suggest that some of the Venezuelans who had been able to receive documentation of their legal status before the Trump administration terminated the program could sue to challenge their deportations. So that part right there is important. If they were already able to get documentation of that status, they could sue. In a separate case, the justices on Friday criticized the Trump administration for seeking to provide only a day's warning to a different group of Venezuelan immigrants in Texas it had been trying to deport under expansive powers of the Alien Enemies Act, an 18th century wartime law. The Trump administration had accused that group of migrants being members of a violent gang, Tren de Aragua. Monday's orders affects a much broader swath of Venezuelans currently living in the U.S. legally under the terms of a Biden-era program. So let me just say something right here. And I know people have different opinions about this, but I will say this. I am gravely concerned that we have entered into an era where administrations will overturn what previous administrations have done. And it seems to be this back and forth thing. And you basically put people in this country in limbo, because one minute it's like you're protected. The next minute you're not protected. Or 1 minute it's this is the law for said group. The next thing you know, that law is gone. And it puts people in a difficult situation here. Now, here's something I do want to say. This is why, and I said this before. Remember when Obama said we got to protect the dreamers, and he put in that protective status for the dreamers? There wasn't a next step. And we talked about this over a year ago. I said, well, what was that next step after Obama said we got to protect the dreamers? By next step, I mean, what was their pathway after that towards citizenship? And from what I understand from talking to people, there was no pathway after that towards citizenship. And what we've seen, particularly in the United States and this country, is that immigration has been a problem as long as I've been alive. Every candidate that runs for president say, yes, immigration is an issue. We need to fix it, but they don't really fix it. So it's almost as if, and they probably thought at that time that no one was going to come in and overturn it, but still, you should have provided a pathway for them to get citizenship. That wasn't there. There's a lot of things that need to change with our immigration system and the process that we have in this country. So when I say the system is fixed, it's been this way as long as I can remember. There are people who come from other countries or certain countries into the US, and they can get citizenship very quickly. And then there are people that come from other countries, and I've talked to people that said it took them 10 years. How does it take 10 years to become a citizen? Why is that process so long? Why is it so lengthy? To me, this doesn't make any sense. So this particular issue, regardless who the president has been, the pathway to citizenship in this country should have been a more speedy, effective, efficient process, and it's not. And that's how you end up with some of the situations that we have right now, right? So then we go back to the foreign policy of it all. This is specifically directed towards the Venezuelan migrants. And one of the things that I learned from talking to Anya Parampil, who was in Venezuela, and she wrote a whole book about this, The Corporate Coup, Venezuela, right? You have to know that some of the people who came here from Venezuela aren't even from Venezuela. What Anya explained to me is that some of the people who were in Venezuela migrated from other South American countries to Venezuela first. So they didn't choose to come to the US first. They chose to go to another country on their continent first. And then the people who are coming from Venezuela, don't forget, if you read Anya Parampil's book about the corporate coup, don't forget about the coup that the US government implemented in Venezuela. This country is just complicit. Like, that doesn't mean everybody who's coming here is coming here because of that reason, but we have something to do with it. We've created some of the crisis that's happening in Venezuela. And a lot of people, some people will tell you, oh, it's because they tried to do socialist policies and that's why, No. The US government implemented coups in Venezuela. They also provided weapons to people in Venezuela. They let these countries just become a mess because of their intervention. So read Anya Parampil's book, because she was there and she talked a lot about this. A lot of times people want to talk about, oh my God, they're here. I don't know. Get them out of here. Why are they here? But they don't want to talk about why they came here. They don't want to talk about what was happening in their country that oftentimes the US government was complicit in, and why these people leave. They also don't mention to you, and this is something else we got to mention as well. They also don't mention to you that people are not just coming to the US. People are going to the UK. People are going to Europe. When I lived in Germany, there were refugees there too. In fact, when I lived in Germany, there were refugees from Turkey that lived in Germany, and they lived in the ghettos. They called them Turkish ghettos. So this isn't something that's new. This has been going on for quite a long time. Now, since the Supreme Court has lifted that protective status, that gives ICE full right to go in and do a full deportation of the Venezuelan migrants that just came in. And I want you to think about something. I want you to think about all the money that went towards all the different cities like New York and Boston and Chicago, all the money that went towards providing them housing, giving them debit cards and all that type of stuff. If this deportation happens, what was all that money for? What was it all for? It's just wasted. That was wasted money, wasted resources. And that path to citizenship is incredibly important. And people don't want to talk about it, but it's a problem in this country. It goes on to say here, the court has been inundated with applications arising from President Trump's blitz of executive orders, many of them seeking to pause or limit trial court rulings, blocking the administration's aggressive agenda, notably on immigration. Island, a lawyer representing the immigrants challenging the Trump administration, called the court's decision truly shocking, especially that it was announced in a 2-paragraph order with no reasoning. This is the largest single action stripping any group of non-citizens of immigration status in modern U.S. history. Mr. Allen says the humanitarian and economic impact of the court's decision will be felt immediately and will reverberate for generations. Tricia McLaughlin says a spokeswoman for the Department of Homeland Security called the decision a win for the American people and the safety of our communities. And this is the other bad part about it, right? Is like everybody who came here is not committing crime. And it gives people this impression that all of the people, all the migrants who came here are criminals, and everyone is not. The Biden administration exploited parole programs to let poorly vetted migrants into the country, from MS-13 gang members to known terrorists and murderers. See, again, they using this to paint a broad group of people. The Trump administration is reinstituting integrity into our immigration system to keep our homeland and its people safe. But meanwhile, at the same time, they just let refugees come from South Africa. The Afrikaners who came from South Africa, who fled South Africa, and people say, oh, they left because of the violence. The people who came from Venezuela left because of violence. Oh, but that's not okay. See, this is the gotcha, okay? Because if you can applaud the white South Africans coming here and you say, well, they left, they were fleeing violence, but you have a problem with people from other countries coming here because they were fleeing violence, that's the gotcha. Immigration, big problem in this country. And I don't know if this is something that is going to be resolved, honestly, even within my lifetime. I don't know. I know it's been an issue for a long, long time. And the pathway to citizenship in this country, that's something that could have been approved a long time ago, a long, long time ago. And it just makes people feel, I guess, like it makes some people feel, I don't know, like they're in limbo or they're not safe. Like I know people who came to Boston, they were able to get citizenship like that because of where they came from. People who came here from the UK, they were able to get citizenship pretty quickly compared to everybody else. Some of the people who came here from Haiti, I had a classmate who was originally from Jamaica. She told me it took 10 years for her to get her citizenship here. What is happening? Why does it take so long for certain people, but not for others? We'll have to keep an eye on this story. I don't know where this is going to go, but we'll have to keep an eye on it. Could be a sign of what's to come. Let's go to some of the comments here in the chat. Eric said, smooth ride if you're Canadian. Yeah, depending on which country you come from, it's easier for you. Easier process. Thank you, Marlon. Executive orders should only be removed by both the House and the Senate, not the next administration. And it is time for term limits for Supreme Court justices. So I 100% agree with you. I don't think people should have a lifetime appointment. I don't know about you guys, but think about it this way. Have you ever had a job and they said this is a lifetime lifetime like appointment? I don't know. I've never had that. Like, so I don't think it's cool that they have a lifetime appointment. I do think there should be term limits in Congress. I don't even think the Senate term should be 6 years. But that's just me. You know, I know some people agree, some people disagree, but I don't know, man. Something's gotta change there. It's wild. Okay. All right, guys, we are moving on to the next story. This one is oof. Everybody is roasting this guy. The system is fixed. And you'll see just how fixed the system is when we get into this conversation about Wes Moore. Wes Moore is the governor of Maryland. I spoke to some of my family members in Maryland. That's where my family is originally from. They are not fond of Wes Moore. Because you see, Wes Moore, though, he kind of reminds me of the next Barack Obama. That's what he reminds me of. And when Wes Moore was running for office, he really gave people the hope, particularly in the Black community, that he was going to look out for them. Right? Wink, wink. Yeah. But Wes Moore did something recently that has given people a headache, particularly Black communities. Maryland Democratic Governor Wes Moore vetoes bill to study reparations. That's him, guys. That is Wes Moore, the governor of Maryland, right? So this is the guy a lot of people, particularly in Maryland, they had a lot of hope and faith in when he was running for governor, and particularly Black voters in Maryland said he's going to be the one to hear our needs and understand our issues, etc. No. And I'm warning you about Wes Moore right now. In my opinion, I believe that he is the next Barack Obama. They are already, and by they, I mean corporate media is already mentioning his name as a potential 2028 presidential candidate. Now, he said on The View he's not interested in running for president, but we've heard people say this before and then they end up running anyway, right? So let me show you what Wes Moore did. Let's go on. Maryland Governor Wes Moore has come under fire after he vetoed a state bill to study reparations as a remedy to the lasting economic and human harms caused by slavery and racism. 3 other Democratic states have successfully passed reparations bills in recent years: California, Illinois, and New York. Wes Moore is the country's only sitting Black governor and is widely seen as a potential Democratic candidate for president in 2028. Maryland's Legislative Black Caucus condemned Moore's move and suggests lawmakers would override his veto. So let's go back to, let's put his face back up here, okay? Can make it a little bit bigger for you. Don't hide from us, Wes. Let's put him back up here, okay? Okay. See, the problem is this. You have candidates like Wes Moore, like Hakeem Jeffries, like Richie Torres, like Jim Clyburn, and they are supposed to represent the Black community. And so people will look at them and say, hey, there's someone running for office that looks like me. Hey, they're talking about the Black community. All right, I should vote and support this person. What a lot of times what people don't know is that people like Wes Moore were selected. They were already chosen. And a lot of times, I'm willing to bet you, AIPAC already recruited Wes Moore before he ran for governor. Just like I told you the breakdown about Hakeem Jeffries, how AIPAC was already in his ear before he ran for Congress, I'm willing to bet you that AIPAC and probably J Street as well were already in Wes Moore's ear before he ran for governor. These people have been selected for you. We got to be very careful. We have to be careful that the people that are being put in front of us, that they say represent you, are there because they're from the grassroots and not there because they were selected by corporate interests or they were selected by said lobby interest groups to pretend like they're for the Black community, pretend like they're going to do something for Black people when they're actually not. Now, what Wes Moore went on to say is that he vetoed it because he said we don't need another study. We don't need more studies. The studies have already been done. But what he did not do is you don't see him pushing any type of bill to go straight towards cash reparations. You don't see him doing that. What you see him talking about is we got to move towards like entrepreneurship and uplifting Black communities here in Maryland. And as someone whose family is from Maryland, and particularly Baltimore, I have to tell you, what these elected officials have done to Baltimore is absolutely disgusting. The way that they have allowed the city to crumble The way that they have ignored, you know, the claims and the screams from the Black community over the years is absolutely disgusting. Baltimore is the only city that I can go to when I go back home to visit my family where you literally have a building that's demolished in the middle of the freaking road and the city doesn't even clean it up. That's Baltimore. Where you have people living in poverty, where you have to walk around one block, you might be downtown, you go right up the street, you're back in the ghetto. They never wanted to improve it. They never wanted to fix it. And by the way, Baltimore, as long as I remember, had Black mayor after Black mayor after Black mayor. Every puppet that has been put in front of them was selected. They're not from the grassroots. Wes Moore is not from the grassroots. Number one, he's smiling too damn hard for me. Now, if I would have met Wes Moore, as soon as I saw the smile, I'm like, nah, that motherfucker's smiling too hard. He's smiling a little too hard, just like Barack Obama was smiling too hard. And you can't trust it. You can't trust it. You look a little too polished for me. You don't scream grassroots. You look like somebody threw you in a suit and they said, go step in front of the Black community, but also make sure you do the bidding of Israel. So the point that I'm trying to make is this. I agree. Studies have been done, but what he did not do is go forward and say, yes, American descendants of slavery in Maryland, yes, they are owed reparations. Yes, they are owed cash reparations. He wouldn't do that. He doesn't do that. He's talking about, let's look into entrepreneurship. You know what you need to be an entrepreneur? Healthcare. More people would try to pursue entrepreneurship if they knew that they would still have their health care if they left their employer. And if you have a family and your family's on your health insurance, you're not going to just quit your job and say, I want to start to try to open a business. Now I don't have health care for my kids. Is Wes Moore doing that? You want to talk about vetoing bills? I bet you Wes Moore didn't veto any bills for Israel. Every state in this country gives money to Israel. Do you know that? That's right. My state of Massachusetts also gives money to Israel. I bet you he didn't veto any of those damn bills. These are puppets that are selected, that are placed in front of you to trick you, to make you think that these people are going to serve your community when they're actually going to put the interests of Wall Street, the MIC, and of course, Israel first. That's why he passes it off and says, well, we don't need another study. Let's focus on uplifting communities and entrepreneurship. You know how many times I've heard this story? Do you know how many times I've heard, let's talk about entrepreneurship. Let's uplift communities. For years, he is being promoted to run for president in 2028. He's not going to push forward any type of reparations bill because Wes Moore wants to continue his political career. Now, he said he's not interested in running for president in 2028, but we'll see. Even if it's not 2028, he may be interested at some point later on down the road. The point is he doesn't want to mess up his political career. Now, he may have just lost some votes in Maryland from the Black community for this one, but he'll make it up. The Democratic Party will help him make up those votes. They'll go out to the lily white communities. They'll go out to those liberal communities in the suburbs, and they'll get white people to come out and support Wes. How do you guys think Jim Clyburn continues to win? It's not a lot of Black people voting for Jim Clyburn. It's white liberals voting for Jim Clyburn. So we got to start passing on, and we're not going for the Todd Bridges dude. He really kind of reminds me of Todd Bridges. We're not going for the Todd Bridges dude. You got to be careful. You can't go for the Hakeem Jeffries types. These people are selected. Selected. Phil Scott said something about this as well. I want you to hear what Phil Scott had to say. Because what he references here is how the Democratic Party, they just don't learn, and they still expect to get our vote, and they keep putting us last or removing us from the list entirely. Listen to this.
You just don't know when to quit, do you? You don't know when to quit. You don't realize, like, do you like to lose? Do you like to lose? Look at how you lost terribly with Kamala Harris. You gave this woman what did she get, $1 billion, whatever, something like that? She got, and you lost. You lost because a lot of black people said it out. That's really what a lot of it is. And, excuse me, and some black people that did vote, some voted more for Trump, okay, than the last time. Instead of you assessing and saying, you know what, reparations is a very important issue to the most important block of votes that we have. It's the FBA vote. You still pushing. No, we ain't doing that. No reparations, no nothing. We're not doing it. How many more elections do you have to lose? How many? Then we get to this other thing. We talk about the Democrats and what they done. See, let's go back to the
pause for a second. That's the thing, right? Because I think the plan of the Democratic Party, I think eventually they want to get to the point where they don't have to rely on the black vote. I really do. I think that's the plan. I think, look, the same way that I present the data on this show, they saw the data before I did, okay? So the same way that I show you the numbers, how black people stayed home in 2024, when you compare Kamala's election to her predecessors, she lost the black vote. The same way I show you those numbers, they saw those numbers too. They know what's happening. So I think their goal is to try to get other groups to get votes from other groups so they don't have to rely on the black vote. Now, that's not going to happen very quickly. That'll probably be some time. It'll probably take years before they could get to that point. In the meantime, they'll just dress up people and put them in front of you and say they look like you and they're black like you, so you support them and vote for them, even though, wink, wink, they're going to be working for me and doing things for me.
Civil rights movement. You know why the civil rights movement worked? You know why the civil rights movement, why they got so much done in that time period? Because it was FBAs. 98% FBAs. Of course, you had a couple of Caribbean brothers and sisters in the mix, but it was majority FBAs. All on code. We're trying to get ourselves free. When the Democrats start importing people here, okay, and they start saying, how do we undermine FBA unity? We really can't see. We go in and try to do it. They're going to be suspicious of that. They're going to see us coming. They're going to really unify and get at us. So what do? We go handpick certain people from the diaspora to come over here. It's not the brothers and sisters in the diaspora that's the riders, right? It's not them. I've met plenty of them. They have told me about the people that come over here to America, just like with that situation with the Afrikaners. You got the white people in South Africa say, them people going over there, that's not the ones you want. They saying it. The white South Africans are saying it, right? Excuse me. And I've met Africans, even talked to some Caribbeans and say, hey, a lot of people that come over here, that's not really the ones, right? And if I did not go over there and talk to them face to face, I would have a different attitude about it, right? I'd probably be extremely anti-immigrant from the diaspora if I didn't go over there and see for myself. But now I know, of course, with travel and talking to brothers and sisters too, we know that's not the case.
So Phil Scott's talking about his experience. And the thing I want to add here is there's been like, I guess, controversy about like Wes Moore. Some people say he's not a Black American. His father, from what the information I looked at, his father is American descendant of slavery. His father is, his mother is not. So just FYI for people who were wondering here.
So they handpick people that's going to sell out. They bring their parents over here. They raise their kids to look at us different. They say they want to come over here, benefit from all our, hurt, pain, and death to benefit. There would be no such thing as a Wes Moore if it wouldn't been for our ancestors. Okay. And then you get in this position and you can do good in this position and you say no, which you benefited coming from the Caribbean, coming from Jamaica. You benefited because them folks didn't want nobody over here but them.
And I think one of the points that Phil Scott is making here is that the thing is, it shouldn't even be this way, right? But you see, the system is fixed. It shouldn't be this way. When you look at the Black diaspora, we should all want to work together, but that's not what happens. That's not the way that things work. Now, Wes Moore in particular, this is something that I brought up on Mark Lamont Hill's show. I think that the people do need to understand that it seems like we are constantly being looked over. It seems like, and by we, I mean those of us who are American descendants of slavery, right? Those of us who are our FBA, it seems like we're constantly looked over. You really want to tell me you think Kamala Harris was qualified? Because I can name a number of other women, if we want to stick with the women route, that were 100% qualified, way more qualified than Kamala Harris. Black ones. You really think Kamala Harris was qualified? Because I don't think she was. So when you see like Phil Scott like say these things, and sometimes people hear this and they'll say, oh, Phil Scott's anti-immigrant, da-da-da. No, that's not the case. Phil Scott has traveled, like he talked about this before. He's gone to several countries in Africa and all that type of stuff. Phil Scott, when he's talking about the people that are not trying to work together, he's talking about the people who are trying to divide. He's talking about those who look down on Black Americans the same way that some white people look down on us. That's who he's talking about. And it seems like it is one after another, because it was Barack Obama, then it was Kamala Harris, and now the corporate media and the Democratic Party, they trying to push Wes Moore. I'm looking at the timing of all of this. It's like Wes Moore goes on The View and they're trying to convince him to run for president in 2028. Next thing you know, he vetoes the reparations bill. And like I said, you can say, yeah, we don't need another study. The numbers that study's already been done. The information's there. But then the next response to that is, yeah, let's move forward to pursue reparations for descendants here in Maryland. He's not doing that. Because I know, and I'm pretty sure he knows, that all the big money interest groups that back him and support him don't want that. The moment he goes down that road, his political career will probably be over. AIPAC, J Street, all these lobby interest groups that back him will drop him. And that would be that. And you would hear no more about Wes Moore. He will just be that one dude that kind of looked like Todd Bridges that was the governor of Maryland. Listen to this part as well.
Keep undermining us every step of the way. How the Democrats is going to do what's right by Black people when you have non-FBAs and a few FBAs too, that's part of the boule, undermining us constantly. This is why the grassroots can't stand y'all behind.
The grassroots. And that's the part I really wanted to drive home. Hakeem Jeffries, Wes Moore, Jim Clyburn. Jim just need to go ahead and retire. Just retire. Jim. Kamala, all these people are not grassroots. They're not from the grassroots. Some of these people were selected when they were in college. Some of them already had lobby interest groups like AIPAC looking at them when they were in high school. Cory Booker, same thing. They're not from the grassroots, and that's why they get as far as they do in the political space. Now, he mentioned the boule, and this is another thing we brought up before on this show. The Black boule, the gatekeepers, the Roland Martins. Like this is another problem, right? Some people would refer to them as the Huxtables, kind of like the Huxtables, but they also help maintain that status quo and maintain that infrastructure. They also actively work to silence and silence and black out the Black grassroots. They work to do that. And the thing is, like, people think it's just, they say, oh, it's just white people working against Black people. No, it's not. They actively work to gatekeep and to prevent any more attention going towards something that's grassroots. Now, you want to hear something that's funny? Andy Ellis, who I had on the show, who is running for governor of Maryland, running the Green Party, guess what the big thing on his sign is? The big thing that he's pushing for is reparations, cash reparations. And the current governor of Maryland, who is Black, just told you, no, we don't need that. Let's look at entrepreneurship and uplifting communities. First of all, people need to explain to me, what do you mean when you say uplift communities? Because I keep hearing this term go around. Let's uplift communities. How? What is your plan? Because sometimes uplift communities transfers into gentrification. Sometimes uplifting communities is, we're going to build these new condos in the community, and this is going to be so great for all of you. Your neighborhood is going to be so much better. And then you're kicked out of the neighborhood because the prices on all of this new infrastructure that they built is so expensive that you can't afford it. And that's for somebody else. That's not for the people who are living there. That's for the people who come in there. So what does he mean by uplifting communities? What does Wes Moore mean when he says this? He doesn't have to break down details. No, we're not gonna focus on reparations. Let's talk about just getting you into entrepreneurship. Okay. How are you gonna do entrepreneurship with no health care? Tell me. You know the number of businesses that people start that fail? Especially in the restaurant industry. You know how many restaurants fail every year? Do you have something to go back to? Let's let Phil finish here.
This is why the grassroots has a lot of vitriol to all you educated folk in the Democrat Party, because you care about just getting whatever little crumbs that you're going to get, and you say to hell with the rest of the 43 million FBAs that can really use that kind of help. The FBAs in Maryland that can really use that kind of help.
He's just focusing on himself. Wes Moore, and this is the thing, it's not just Wes Moore, it's also the Black boule as well. This is another thing we talked about. It's all about, like, what can I do for me? What can I do to enrich myself? What can I do to further my career, to further my political career? Pulling up the ladder from behind you. Not leaving the ladder there so that other people in the community can also walk up the ladder and get to where you are. That's selfishness. That's not community. That's selfish. And there's a lot of people talking about it. A lot of people talking about this Wes Moore issue, right? And I'm just tired. There are people defending and saying, oh, well, you guys said you don't want to study, so what are you complaining about? We're complaining about the fact that he didn't offer the details of moving forward, that he didn't offer, okay, this is how we need to move forward. Yes, you guys need cash reparations, and this is how we need to do it. He didn't offer that. The point is, he don't want to do it. Period. And what kills me is when I hear people who are part of the Black Boule who are falling for this, and they're sitting up there and they're telling people, well, guys, you know, he said he's going to uplift communities. That means gentrification. When the communities improve, you won't be allowed to stay there. But Wes will.
Everybody get money. The immigrants was coming in here underneath Joe Biden. What were they getting? Money. They wasn't getting studies. They wasn't getting hopes and prayers. They were getting money. Free hotel, free food, free EBT, free everything. Money, something to spend. Black folks can't even get that.
That part right there. When we ask for a debt that is owed, let's study it. Or, well, we don't need to study. We already got the study. Let's talk about entrepreneurship. I'm calling it right now, guys. Keep your eye on this guy. Beware of this. Keep your eye on Wes Moore. I really do believe this is the future Barack Obama. I really, really do. They're already pumping him up. I remember when I saw Barack Obama on, I think that was Oprah, before he ran for president. You see, the fix is already in. When I say the system is fixed, this isn't happening because the system is broken. This is happening because the system is fixed. We need to break it. The system needs to be broken. Otherwise, you continue to get more Wes Moores, more Barack Obamas, and the communities will continue to crumble, or they'll be rebuilt without you. Let's go to some of the comments here in the chat. Thank you, Marlon. That smile says APAC money. Wandy says Wes isn't FBA. I think his dad is. I read that his father is from US. His mom's not. Thank you, Miss Ritchie. George Soros literally chose Baltimore as his policy testing ground from 1996 to 2023. I grew up in Baltimore, and it is sad how bad it has become. It is. Like, and I say this, and I don't want anyone who's from Baltimore to feel like I'm bashing, like my family's from Baltimore too, like I'm bashing Baltimore, but it's ridiculous. Like I said, they've had black mayor after black mayor, and what has happened to Baltimore is devastating. It's devastating. I've not lived in any other city where people just literally let buildings crumble, fall apart, and leave the rubble there. Thank you, Jacqueline, for the super sticker. Give Jacqueline a woo, 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 woo. Thank you. Where's the love? I will never vote for Democrats again, especially black candidates. The CBC done F up. I'm done. Democrats don't want black voters. They never did. Thank you, Sister George, for the super sticker. Hanifa says, I'm ADOS. I keep my money in my pocket. I don't pay people to disrespect me. Thank you, Marlon. Working class people should register as independent black people, especially. Will never be taken seriously until they do, and force them to take us seriously. Thank you for the super sticker, Kat Ferguson. Thank you, Cougar Lady. Sabby, a South Carolina lawmaker, wants to disinvite Onion Head Wes Moore to a huge fundraising dinner. Black folks are not happy. Wes forgot the Dem primary starts in South Carolina and not Iowa. You're right. Fire says, Sabby, he doesn't have the velvet glove voice to placate the masses as well as Obama did. That's true. Tia says, I still haven't forgiven the last Barack Obama. Let's go to the comments on Rockfin. Yeah. Thank you for the comments on Rockfin, the tips, Roger. The U.S. tried but failed to implement coups in Venezuela, Sab, because Chavez and Maduro is not a puppet for the U.S. And thank you for this one. We can't depend on politicians to fire themselves, so we are going to have to do it. And this is how we do it. Get 23 more states to put a legislative amendment on the ballot, asking for ratification to allow voters to place their own amendments on the ballot. 2, voters from each of those 40 states push a CBI amendment mandating their state legislators call for an Article 5 constitutional convention to force Congress to send an amendment to the U.S. Constitution saying 4 things. 1, take 2 years away from all U.S. senators and give it to the House. 2, make their elections reflect the House where they all run at the same time. Now House and the Senate, along with the president, are 4 years. 3, move them in alignment with presidential election ballot. We will call them federal elections and midterms will now be called state elections. Since 36 governor races happen, 4, have one senator represent half of all continuously connected counties and the other senator represent the other half. 5, then put term limits on all the legislative and Scotus. Regarding Westmore, there is no solidarity as a community when they come here, Sabby. They're coming here to get a bag. So they'll either 1, stay away from us, or 2, AF fight, not our fight. 3, they become racially and ethnically bigoted towards us. They don't want the Khalil Mahmoud treatment. The Boule NAACP was started by Zionists. Du Bois argued for Zionism. Even our beloved king was co-opted by them, which is why they hated Malcolm X so much. Shout out to brother Malcolm X, whose 100th birthday was yesterday. Yeah, I saw that. I saw all the shout outs to Malcolm X on social media. Yeah, you can still visit Malcolm X's house in Boston, by the way, if you guys are interested in doing that. Okay, we are moving on and we're making good time, ladies and gentlemen. Now it's time for something fun and then we'll get to the other stories. Quick thing I want to share with you. So some of you were asking me to share protein tips and all that kind of stuff. So something that I like to do is if there were certain foods that I really liked at certain restaurants, I try to see how I can make those foods at home, but make them healthier and higher protein. And one that I did the other night, and this was really good, I made a healthier version of the Taco Bell Crunch Wrap. It was good. After this, I'm telling you, you feel like you can lift tons, man. Or maybe not tons, but you guys where I'm going. This is a healthy version of the Taco Bell Crunch Wrap. It's 61 grams of protein, 510 calories. Taco Bell's wrap is roughly 15 to 19 grams of protein and 530 calories. My version tastes better too. So let me play it here and I'll tell you what I use for substitutions. Instead of going to Taco Bell, you can make your own crunch wraps. I'm using 93% lean ground beef. It's already seasoned. The sauce is already there, yada, yada. I use Greek yogurt and smoked paprika for the sauce instead of sour cream and all that jazz. Fold it up into a crunch wrap. And then I'm going to throw this in the pan to sear it and get it nice and crisp. This is also a corn tortilla right here that I use. I use the low carb giant tortillas. So just another way to get higher protein, less calories. And after you sear it on both sides, there it is. There she goes, the crunch wrap. Instead of going to Taco Bell. So one of the things that's kind of cool, guys, and for those of you that like sour cream, you can always replace sour cream with plain Greek yogurt. I do this in chili sometimes too. Instead of adding a spoonful of sour cream, I'll add a spoon of plain Greek yogurt instead. And you can make sauces with plain Greek yogurt too. So I just added to the Greek yogurt, smoked paprika and a little bit of garlic powder and onion powder. And then even with the cheese, you want to measure things out, like 1 serving here. So I put some of it on the bottom and then some of the cheese on the top. So just 1 serving of the reduced fat Mexican cheese. if you use tortillas, like, I don't know about you guys, but I love tacos and Mexican food. And I think I told you guys this before, but I love me some tacos and all that jazz. So when it comes to the tortillas, instead of using a regular tortilla, which is more calories and less protein, they actually make the ones that are low carb, and they have the ones that are called protein tortillas too. So you can get those higher protein, less calories, and 93% lean ground beef. That's the other thing, because when you get to like the 80-20, it has higher calories and more fat. So there are ways you can make substitutions. I would have preferred to use a tostada instead of the corn tortilla for the small round part here, but the grocery store didn't have tostados, so I did with what I could do. But that was my dinner. So just a way to, make things a little bit more healthy. That's one of the classes, one of the workshops I want to add to show people how to make some of your favorite foods that you like, but have them healthier, less calories, and higher protein. So it was really good. It's better than the Taco Bell Crunch Wrap. It was better than that one. We can go to part 2 of Tight VNC. So yeah. And it also depends I know some people don't like yogurt. So if you don't like yogurt, I don't know what to tell you for a replacement then. Sorry. But I love yogurt. So for me, it's a yes. Okay. We're moving on to the next story, ladies and gentlemen. If you haven't done so, smash the like button. Thank you. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. So there is new information that has been revealed at the Diddy trial. This involves a former member of Danity Kane. Her name is Dawn Richard, and she is the one that is going to mention Usher's name. So this is the first time I'm hearing Usher's name mentioned in the Diddy trial. One thing I do want to go ahead and we want to dispute, there has been a rumor that's been going around that there was an audio recording from Prince. You guys know, like Purple, the Great Purple one that was played in the courtroom. That's not true. This guy here is also debunking that. I don't know who created that audio or whatever, but if you follow Inner City Press on Twitter, he's at the trial as well. He's giving you, up to date moments throughout the trial. And he did say something about that rumor about the Prince thing. So listen to this.
I became aware this morning that someone had reported that what they called UN's report at Inner City Press claimed that there was a Prince audio. No, there was not an audio by somebody called Sujit, who's not Prince, and who Cassie Ventura was saying, "I'll kill you if you don't give me the video of the freak off back." So that was false. So for that reason, we've decided to put it all in one place. If it's not in the ebook on Google Play, we're not reporting that it happened. Let's put it that way.
Okay, so now that we've gotten that out of the way, because like I said, that has been going around social media. So that was not Prince, just FYI, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get into this situation with Dawn Richard. So she did testify. And one of the things that I noticed about her testimony, she does talk about like the things that she witnessed, or that she says that she witnessed that happened to Cassie. But one of the things that was interesting is the other people that she mentioned that she alleges were present. And another thing I want to point out too about this particular case, once again, Diddy is not on trial for domestic abuse. What the defense is trying to do is establish his character, right? Like, so they're trying to show a pattern of behavior, and they're trying to use the actions towards Cassie to say, this is why she could not leave. This is why she wasn't able to break free of the sex trafficking, etc. So a lot of these stories that you're hearing throughout the trial where people are basically co-signing what Cassie said about the physical abuse, he's not being charged with that. But that is being done to try to prove that Cassie had no way out, right? So let's get into this issue here with Dawn Richard.
The goal this week from federal prosecutors is to try and back her up. And that starts with bringing Dawn Richard back to the witness stand. She was on Making the Band. You'll remember her from Danity Kane. And she says in 2009, she was at Sean Combs' home studio in Los Angeles when she saw Combs try to hit Cassie Ventura with a frying pan and then kick her on the ground while she was curled up in a fetal position. Then, she says, Combs took her and Kalina Harper, the other Diddy Dirty Money bandmate, into the recording studio, locked the door, and said it would be better if you didn't say anything. And she took that as a threat. Combs also apparently gave them flowers at the same time. Now, the defense objects to this. They say this is all based on gossip, not on real-time recollections. They say it's all meant to build up Cassie Ventura's story after the fact. But federal prosecutors say this is the kind of testimony that helps prove Sean Combs created a culture of coercion and a culture of fear by getting violent and then by threatening those who may have witnessed his behavior.
So that part there we'll hold on to. Miranda says, hitting with the frying pan, I thought only women did that. Isn't that what Lionel Richie's wife wasn't there a story that Lionel Richie's wife, his first wife, did that to him and she caught him cheating and she hit him with, or was that like a pot of hot water? I forget. Somebody got hit with the frying pan. Anyway, pay attention to what they just said here. This part about Dawn claiming that she was warned by Diddy that if she said something that people disappear. We'll get into a little bit of the transcript here. Again, this is Inner City Press. Goes on. We'll start with the part where Dawn takes the stand. So Asa Slavic says, when Mr. Combs told you people could go missing, how did you interpret it? Don Richard says that people could die. I couldn't believe that this could be the beginning of a journey for us. And so AUSA says, as Diddy Dirty Money, Don Richard says yes. So let me just break things down a little bit here. If you're not familiar with Making the Band, Dawn comes from the group Danity Kane. Danity Kane was formed during a show called Making the Band. Now, what's interesting about this, and I think you'll find this one funny, Making the Band was originally started by Lou Pearlman, the same guy who founded NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys and all these other groups, who was later sued by these groups because he was cheating them out of their money. So, and then somehow it was passed over. Lou Pearlman passed over Making the Band to Diddy, and that became Making the Band season 2. So I don't know. Corruption just seems to follow people. They all in the same circle. You know what I'm saying? But that's where Danity Kane comes from. That's where Dawn comes from that show Making the Band. I don't have time tonight to go through everything that happened with Danity Kane because there have been claims by the members there that Diddy didn't pay them what he was supposed to pay them, that he wasn't planning to produce a record until there was pressure from the viewers of the show. There's so much that goes into that. But back to the Dawn piece. So after Danity Kane, I guess, decided to dissolve, Dawn continued to work with Diddy on this project, what was called Diddy Dirty Money. So that's what they're referring to here. Let's go on here. AUSA says, what did you observe? Dawn said he would drag her and kick her and punch her in the mouth. What would prompt these acts of violence? Combs Westmoreland objection. So there was an objection there. The judge overruled. Dawn said when she would speak up for herself. So it goes on to say, who in security witnessed these things? Dawn said D-Rock and Bonds. Where did Miss Ventura get hit? Dawn, her knees, her face, all over. Did there come a time you were in New York for a festival? Dawn says yes, in Central Park. In the residence, what happened? Dawn says that he punched Cassie. She came into the bathroom crying. You could see her upset, like she was hurt. Combs and Westmoreland say objection. The judge says sustained. What injuries did you observe? A swollen eye. Why did you remain with Miss Ventura after this incident? Dawn says, I wanted her to feel supported. What's this? There's a image there, a photo. Dawn says the Central Park event. Photo of Cassie in sunglasses and Dawn Richards too. Why did you wear them? She said solidarity. So there, I guess it's implying that Cassie was wearing sunglasses because maybe she may have had a black eye. Here's another one. The next assault, who was there? Dawn says D-Rock, Capricorn Clark, Harv Pierre. Who was Mr. Pierre? At Bad Boy answering to Sean Combs, did they do anything? None of us did anything. Don says, when we drove back to LA, he slapped Cassie in the mouth and told her to shut the F up. How did the passengers respond? And Don said, we stayed silent for the rest of the ride. So this is something that people have been pointing out is the bystanders, right? Like people are pointing out, like, why is it that those of you who allegedly witnessed these acts, why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you speak up, right? And one of the things that Don said in the trial is that they were afraid to. They were afraid to say anything because of him saying that, you know, people have a way of disappearing, allegedly. Don goes on to say, I asked myself if he did that to someone he supposedly loved, what would he do to an employee? So I'd approach Mr. Combs with softness. Did you try to intervene in the relationship? Don says, no, for my own safety. He goes on to say here, did you see Mr. Combs using drugs? Don said, yes, weed, ketamine, Molly, cocaine. They then ask about opiates. Don says, that I never saw. Who brought him the drugs? One stop. He had it all, including Plan B and birth control. Goes on to say, did you see him with guns? Don says, yes, handguns on his lower back. Who asked, who had guns? Don said, security, D-Rock, and Bonds. What did you do after Bad Boy? Saying, whenever I got momentum, I'd get a FaceTime from him. How would you speak to him? Very soft. I'd always call him bro. Why did you not disclose the abuse you'd seen? Don said, I was told not to by Mr. Combs and Harve Pierre. When did you speak out? Don said in 2024. Don said, I saw Miss Ventura take the stand and tell the truth. And then, of course, Combs Westmoreland team here says objection. The judge said sustained. This part's important. Did you see Miss Ventura file a civil suit and then file your own? Don said, yes. So that part's important for people to know that Dawn filed her civil suit after she saw that Cassie did. This piece here, the judge says cross-examine. So Combs Westmoreland says, you are aware there's a motion to dismiss your lawsuit. Don said, I have civil lawyers. So Diddy's team says, you sat down with the prosecutors and the allegations have changed. Don said, I've been consistent. So this is of course, the defense here. You testified he attempted to hit her about the eggs and Miss Ventura dropped down in a fetal position, right? Don says, yes. Did you ever say you heard a pan hit the wall? You didn't see it. Don says, I don't recall. Would you agree with me? It has been hard for you to keep your story straight with respect to this egg incident. Don says, I told it as close as I could. The day after, you say Mr. Combs said people go missing. Yes. Let's go to your interview on March 18th, 2025. You did not say anything about Mr. Combs told you people go missing. Don says, I don't recall that. No worries. I'm going to show you a document for the parties only. So it goes on and on and on from there, but I think you guys can see the direction that this is going in. And I want to go to this clip here as well. There's another part that it gets into when we're going into the piece about a little bit of her background and etc. Listen to this and make this a little bit bigger for you guys.
The government calls Dawn Richard to the stand. Where are you from? New Orleans, Louisiana. From 2004 to 2011, who did you work for? Puff Sean Combs. Do you see him? Yes. Who's depicted in this photo? Cassie. In 2009, did you observe an incident between Puff and Cassie? Yes. She was attacked by Sean and kicked. Did you see more violence by him against Cassie? Often. The government then shows Dawn Richard a picture of Diddy Dirty Money. When were you a member of this group? 2009 to 2011. The incident in 2009 when Sean Combs beat Cassie, where was it? In Sean Combs' LA home. We were recording. What did he do? He was saying, "Where the F is my food?" He grabbed a black skillet with eggs and tried to hit her over the head. Cassie dropped to the ground. What did she do? She was in a fetal position. Then what? Sean Combs was kicking her in the head and the body and then dragged her up to the first floor. Glass was breaking and yelling. I was scared for her and for me too. Did you intervene? No. Did you call the police? No. The next day, what happened? He said it had been passionate and she was okay, and that it would be better if we didn't talk, that people could end up missing. How did you understand that? Death. Diddy.
So again, there's that part about people could end up missing. And that's one of the parts that stands out from Dawn's testimony. And there's also this part here where she mentioned Usher. And this is the first time I've seen his name mentioned during this case. Dawn Richards testifies Usher and others were present when Diddy allegedly punched Cassie in the stomach. Let's go ahead and there is Usher. And we all know, remember, it was alleged, and we got to say alleged, that Usher and Justin Bieber may have been victims of Diddy in some way, shape, or form. Justin Bieber is denying that. He has spoken out recently and says that that's not true. Usher, I think Usher's just kind of quiet on this. And hasn't really confirmed one way or the other based on what I've seen. But Justin Bieber did come out publicly and say that it's not true. Now, this scene right here, Dawn Richard, the Danity Kane member who has accused Diddy of sexual abuse, says she witnessed him allegedly beat and punch his ex-girlfriend Cassie while other celebrities, including Usher, were present. And I want you to see who those other celebrities were. It says here, among those allegedly present at the dinner were Usher, musician Neo, Jimmy Levine, and other celebrities that Richard could not recall on the witness stand. So they said they reached out to Usher's teams for a comment, and there has been no response. But this is the very first time I heard Usher's name mentioned. And yeah, and they don't want to respond. Now, again, what people are wondering is, well, why wouldn't Usher, if he was there, why wouldn't he say anything? Why would Neo say anything or do anything if they were present when these things happened? I would probably say because of fear. If it is true that Dawn was told by Diddy that people go missing, I mean, maybe they were afraid. Maybe they were afraid. The problem that Dawn Richard is running into, though, is that people are feeling like there's inconsistencies and that there's some rumors, because I want you to see this so much to the point that now Diddy wants Dawn Richards' lawsuit against him thrown out after the testimony. Remember, she already had the lawsuit before she testified, and there's a picture of Diddy and Dawn there. It says that Diddy is pushing back hard against the civil lawsuit filed by singer Dawn Richard, calling her allegations completely false and asking a judge to dismiss the case entirely. The legal move came Friday, May 16th, the very same day Richard took the witness stand in Diddy's ongoing federal sex trafficking trial. So what's interesting about this one is I have not seen this comment from Diddy about Cassie, right? We don't have a statement from Diddy about Cassie where he says her statements are completely false and you want her testimony thrown out. But he is saying that about Dawn. And it makes you wonder, and I have a poll question there for you guys too about this. It makes you wonder if Diddy may walk, after all of this. Here's Dawn here when she was leaving the courthouse.
You'll be back on Monday?
Have you had a chance to chat with Cassie or see Cassie? I know this hasn't been years maybe for you to kind of see
Dawn, did Diddy abuse you when you were in Vanity Case?
We're not going to talk about the facts of the case right now.
What are the facts of the case?
Can you tell us the facts?
What have you been up to, or any music dropping?
I know you're a part of the person before anything. Where did you get your clothes, Dawn?
Yeah. Now, some people believe that some people are saying that Dawn wants the money, wants a bag or whatever. I don't know. I do know that it was confirmed that Aubrey O'Day, another member of Danity Kane, said that she is not going to testify, but she has made statements in the past as well about Diddy. So it appears among the Danity Kane members, Dawn is there on her own. She is the one that continued to work with Diddy after Danity Kane split. So she may have had a closer relationship with Diddy than the other members of the group. Yeah. All of this is just, it's just wow. Like it's a wow to me. Because as I've told you guys before, do you think Diddy's the only one that's doing this or allegedly doing this? No, we've talked about other players and none of them are on trial, right? Just like with Epstein. Was Epstein the only one that was trafficking women? No, but him and Ghislaine were the only ones on trial, right? So the big players are absent from the court case, absent from the scene. And I think that's important for people to pay attention to. So when I tell you that the system is fixed, the system is still going to try to protect the head of the snake, the people who are in the ultimate position of power. While Diddy had some power, he's not the one that has the ultimate power, right? He answers to someone too. And we've said it before that you don't see those other people there. Like you don't see, what's his face? Clive Davis there, right? You don't see Brett Ratner there. You don't see those people there, right? All these other people, Russell Simmons isn't there. It's just, I don't know. But this trial it's interesting. We'll have to see what happens. You do have the poll, Eric. Let's go ahead and show the poll, because I wanted to know if you guys believed that he was going to walk, because some people are saying it's true. Okay. Diddy's judge stated that he may toss some of the testimony in the Diddy trial. Do you think Diddy will walk? 42% of you said yes. 18% said no. 32% said I'm not sure. And 8% said I plead the fifth. Interesting. Well, folks, we'll have to wait and see. We have one more story for you, ladies and gentlemen. So if you haven't done so, smash the like. Thank you. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. Appreciate you. And we are diving into the final story. This is a deep dive, so get comfortable. We're going to talk about reform versus revolution. And we're going to start it off by focusing on this conversation that Professor Richard Wolff had about reform versus revolution. And then I'm going to show you two live, real examples of what that looks like. And you tell me which way that you would prefer to go. Okay. This includes this interview that you've seen recently with Bernie Sanders on Andrew Schultz podcast, and someone who was a former Black Panther. Because I think that when we talk about reform, I think reform is fine when it's not a life or death situation, when it's not an urgent matter. But I think if you're on the brink of a life or death situation and it's urgent, there are sirens that are screaming, I think revolution is an answer. And revolution doesn't mean necessarily violent. We'll get into all of that. Reform versus revolution. Listen to this.
I'm talking about the debate, the struggle between reform and revolution. Whenever societies are in stress, when basic problems have risen to the level of crises, like now, but has often happened also in the past, this issue called do we respond by reform or do we respond by revolution comes to the fore. About 100 years ago, the leader of the German socialist movement, very strong at that time as a movement, a Polish woman named Rosa Luxemburg, wrote a famous pamphlet titled Reform versus Revolution, because that was the issue in front of the socialists of her time.
And we're going to pause this here for just a second to let that catch up. I think it's a little echoey. I'm just going to, Eric, if you can close out the tabs before that, and then we'll jump back in. Thank you. So, reform versus revolution. Richard Wolff is going to go into an example that all of us are familiar with, which I think was a really good example. And then I'm going to go into a more modern, current example that we have right now. So let's go ahead and go back into the video here.
Right after the First World War in particular. And it has resurfaced over and over again. And I'm talking about it with you because by looking at how it's been in the past, we can understand how it has become yet again, right now, the issue for us, you and me. One place to start, and we could at many points, is American slavery. You know, at the time of the American Civil War, middle of the 19th century, we had had a growing debate over the question of slavery. The southern states allowed, provoked, paid for, embraced, endorsed slavery, and the northern states did not. And so the issue became, for everybody, what is our relationship to slavery? Now, of course, those who liked it, loved it, particularly those in the South who eventually fought a civil war about it, were happy with slavery, wanted to keep slavery. I put them to one side. They weren't involved in the debate over reform versus revolution because they weren't interested in social change. They were interested in holding on to what they had. But let's take a look at those who didn't like slavery, who wanted to do something about it. The reformers were those people who reacted to slavery by wanting to reform it. That's why they were called reformers. And here's what they meant. Slaves should not be bought and sold in ways that separated parents from children, or husbands from wives, or siblings from one another. In other words, okay, you could have a slave, the reformers said, but there are limits, there are rules, there are things you shouldn't do and things you should do to make slavery less onerous.
So this part right here about reform, and he's using the example of slavery. I think this is really important for people to dive into. Basically, those who wanted to have reforms in slavery still wanted to keep the institution of slavery in place. They still wanted to keep the system as it was. Remember, I telling you the system is fixed. They wanted to keep it as it was. They just wanted a couple of tweaks here and there, right? So like Professor Richard Wolff said, like maybe not have children, be sold as slaves, or like maybe have an age limit, that type of thing. But they didn't want to change the system, right? Let's go on.
Less awful. Slaves should be clothed properly. Slaves should be housed adequately. Slaves should be fed decently. These were demands reformers made. Well, then what were the revolutionaries? The revolutionaries were the ones who said, you must go much beyond adequate food, clothing, shelter, treatment of slaves. For the revolutionaries, the problem was slavery itself. What they wanted was abolition, the end of it.
And this is the big difference, right? The revolutionaries wanted to change the system. They wanted to chop down slavery. So they didn't want a reform. They didn't want to reform it. They didn't want a kinder, gentler slavery. They wanted the system torn, burned to the ground. Imagine what would have happened if we would have gone with the former. Imagine if Abraham Lincoln would have said, former isn't kind of, form would be easy. Reforming would be easier. Let's go with that option. Because the fight to abolish slavery wasn't an easy fight. Imagine if they went with that one. A kinder, gentler slavery. In that example, where it's life or death, the world is on fire, revolution is and was the only just response. Now that's slavery and that was in the past, but we're living at a time right now where we need to have a response. We're living at a time right now where people are facing life or death. I just read the report to you the other day. 60% of Americans can't afford a basic cost of living in the United States. 60%, the majority. So we're living in a situation now where it is life and death for many people. And yet you still have people trying to put you back to sleep. You still have people telling you, let's just reform it instead of the system has to be broken. We have to break it and we have to build something new. Some of the people who were telling you that reform is the way, let's just keep trying to reform. And I think you guys are going to see where I'm going with this. Where would those people have been during the time of slavery? Do you think they would have been on the side of revolution? Or do you think they would have said, let's just add some reforms? Because you see, when people are comfortable, and especially when they're not the ones that are impacted, it's a lot easier to say, go with the reform. But when you're not comfortable and you are impacted, those are the people that are more willing to say, no, it's time for a revolution. You do have some class traders, but most rich people are not going to be willing to go on the side of revolution. What did Abraham Lincoln do?
Now, for most of the years leading up to the Civil War, most of the conversation was about reforming. That was thought as far as you could realistically go, even in the North. Those in the North who felt revolutionary was the response, end of slavery, were in the minority. They're remembered by names like John Brown and others who fought for and advocated the end of slavery. The reform versus revolution issue came to a head with the war, when the North and the South went to war in the American Civil War. And very quickly it became clear to the then President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, that to win that war, one important step was to end slavery. Lincoln took the revolutionary path. And the document that forever showed that was called the Emancipation Proclamation. It declared that slavery was illegal. The 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution made slavery illegal in the United States anywhere and everywhere except inside prisons. A very debatable decision that was made, which if we had a lot of time, I would talk to you about.
And he's right about that one, because slavery is still legal under the prison labor system. That's the 13th Amendment allows that to happen. So he's correct about that. But the point is, for those who want to reform for slavery and those who said we want to remove slavery, like the abolitionists, Lincoln went with the latter, went with let's abolish it. Let's get rid of it. Now, at that point in time, do you think that was a popular position? No, it wasn't. And Lincoln's not perfect. There's nothing we got to add, because I saw the movie Lincoln the other night and I felt like, Daniel Day-Lewis did a good job, but I also felt like they kind of whitewashed how Abraham Lincoln really was. Because Abraham Lincoln also it's not like he wanted to go a step further. He wanted to end slavery, but it's not like he wanted black people to vote and all those types of things. We can get into all of that, right? But the point is, if Abraham Lincoln would have sided with the reformists and said, well, let's just reform it, slavery still stands. It was not popular to abolish slavery at that point in time. You know what else wasn't popular at that time? The civil rights movement. You know what else wasn't popular? The women's rights movement. In fact, a lot of the movements that we've had in history in the United States weren't popular at that time. Where do you think I'm going with this? Because when we look at things politically, it's very easy to go with what is popular. That is the easiest thing to do. It's more difficult to go with something that is not popular. I don't think that third parties aren't popular, for example, right? The Democratic Party and the Republican Party is. I think we have reached a point in time when we can no longer just sit back and go with what is popular because it's convenient to do so. This is not to say that it's not going to be hard along the way. It will be hard along the way. But a revolution doesn't necessarily mean that you're out there fighting people in the streets. That's one type of revolution. And I'll show you the definition of what revolution actually means here in just a second. But the point is, an unpopular position at that time was the correct thing to do. And what scares me, particularly when we talk about politics in the United States, is that more people are willing to go with what is easy instead of what is the right thing to do. The whole world has been watching a genocide unfold in Gaza, and more people were willing to go with what was easy instead of what was the right thing to do on Election Day. And that does worry me. Now, we'll come back, Professor Wolff, because now we're going to go into, I want to show you the definition, and then we're going to get into the two examples that I was talking about. One who is a Black Panther and one who is a politician. And I cannot say this enough, that people really gotta wake up. When we look at the definition of what it means to have a revolution, this is a noun, right? So we got to go to the verb. This is the definition, guys. This is what people want you so afraid of. A sudden, radical, or complete change. Oh my God. Don't do that. Not a change. Oh dear. B, a fundamental change in political organization. C, activity or movement designed to affect fundamental changes in socioeconomic situation. D, a fundamental change in the way of thinking about or visualizing something, a change of paradigm. And E, a changeover in use or preference, especially technology. This is what the establishment wants you to be so afraid of. Oh my God, not a sudden change. Not a change in a political organization. Oh no. Now I want to show you something. The first example that we're going to go to is Bernie Sanders. We got two examples here. I want you to hear what Bernie Sanders says to Andrew Schultz. This is recent. This video has been making the rounds on X.
The problem I think a lot of voters had is like they didn't even know if it was her. We didn't even know if Biden was president. We didn't even know if these were her talking points. And we felt that over the last 4 elections, Democrats, we felt that we didn't have a say on who could be president. We talk a lot about the Republicans being autocrats and oligarchs and taking over democracy, but from the Democrat perspective, and I'm a lifelong Democrat, I felt like the Democratic Party completely removed the democratic process from its constituents. And I think they need to have some accountability of that.
No argument here.
I donated for you. I mean, I wanted you to like 2016. I was like, this is going to happen. This guy's going to do it. And it felt like they stole it from me. And I'll be honest, it broke my heart when you supported him.
Look, but you have, in the world that I live in, you got a choice. And I mean, a lot of people, including my wife, agree with you. But, you know, you're down to a choice. Is it going to be Hillary Clinton or is it going to be Donald Trump? Not a great choice.
But it ended up being.
We have to pause it there before we finish because I want to prove a point. When Bernie says that you're down to 2 choices, just stop right there. He is already using establishment talking points. He is already protecting the system that is in place. He's a part of that system. This is what I mean when I say the system is fixed. He doesn't want to break the system. He just wants a couple of tweaks. Bernie Sanders is a reformist. And although he ran on having a political revolution, if you look at the definition of revolution that I just showed you, that doesn't fit that. Because ultimately, he did not want to change the system. He wanted to reform the Democratic Party by implementing certain policies that would make the Democratic Party a better party. But when the house is on fire, you get people out of the burning house. Bernie Sanders wants to keep you in the burning house, but he just wants to put you in another room. His motto should have been, we're having a political reform, not political revolution, because a political revolution wouldn't exist within the 2-party system. A political revolution, after he was cheated in 2016 by the Democratic Party, would have been to burn this all down by taking my people with me, and we're starting a 3rd-party movement. In fact, if Bernie Sanders would have done that in 2016, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. We wouldn't have this conversation about whether or not 3rd parties are more viable if Bernie Sanders would have done that in 2016. But reformists don't want to change the system. Don't believe me? Listen to what he said here.
Him anyway, so why don't we burn it down?
Well, because it's easy to say burning it down means that children are not going to have, food to eat, that the schools will deteriorate, people will not have health care.
I got it.
And I'm an elected official.
Let's go back a little bit because I'm just going to go ahead and debunk something. You see what I mean? He doesn't want to burn it down. He doesn't want the system to change. That's why Bernie is able to do what he does. That's why the Democrats say, yeah, go out on the oligarchy tour and all this jazz, continue doing that. That's why he can continue to do that, because he's not there to change the system. Listen again.
The world that I live in, you got a choice. And I mean, a lot of people, including my wife, agree with you. But, you're down to a choice. Is it going to be Hillary Clinton or is it going to be Donald Trump? Not a great choice.
But it ended up being him anyway, so why don't we burn it down?
To Andrew Schultz's point, this is what we've said over and over, right? didn't Donald Trump win anyway? Look at the look on Bernie's face when Andrew Schultz says that. Yeah. So what's the point? Right? Then he goes on to tell you that people would lose food and all this type of stuff. So listen to this.
Well, because it's easy to say burning it down means that children are not going to have, food to eat, that the schools will deteriorate, people will not have health care.
I got it.
And
don't we already have that now? I was talking to you before about Baltimore. Don't we already have schools that have deteriorated? Has Bernie Sanders stepped foot in these public schools? People don't have food to eat now. People don't have health insurance now. Why is Bernie here pretending like these things don't exist when he spent his whole career talking about these things? Reformists are really good at convincing people that they want a radical change, that there's going to be this big, great change that's coming. They're really good at that. They do it in a different way, right? Because they're still in the system. They're playing in the same system that is the status quo, that's protecting the status quo. So in a way, they have some sort of protection, even though the establishment is going to make sure that their group doesn't win anyway. They still have some sort of protection because they're still playing by the rules. Revolutionaries don't have that protection. They don't have it. I'm going to show you another example. Someone who was a revolutionary, still is a revolutionary, I'd say. This is Assata Shakur. Assata Shakur was a Black Panther who fled to Cuba. They tried to say that Assata Shakur killed police officers. She still maintains her innocence to this day. You guys know how these things were infiltrated with the Black Panthers, how they tried to take them down, right? Assata Shakur did not play within that system. Assata Shakur was not protected, did not have any sort of protection because she played outside of that system. Listen to what she says.
Movement was virtually destroyed on many levels in the 1970s as a result of government repression. The government criminalized our movement in the same way that the government is criminalizing our people. It's saying that, for example, in the 1960s, the Black Panther Party was portrayed by the media as these crazy criminals, these kind of anarchistic Black folks that were just wild and crazy. And that, there was never a balanced picture in terms of what the Black Panther Party was about, so that what people every day saw was these crazy Panthers with guns. And that was the image, that you have a Panther, you have a gun, and you have a criminal element. And as time went by, those Panthers were accused of, in many instances, crimes which they were innocent of. They were framed, they were sent to prison for either conspiracy cases, for false, just trumped up criminal charges, and off the face of the earth, out of the movement, out of the center of struggle. And the movement was, the leaders were just chipped away head by head. They just knocked people's heads off in one way, literally.
No, we can't show that part there. So we'll go back to here. But this is Assata Shakur. Okay. So Assata was a revolutionary, is still a revolutionary. You see, she didn't play within that system. You see the reason why the government tried to take down the Black Panthers and tried to destroy them, right? Because of what she was just saying, because they knew that the system itself was already fixed and there was no point in trying to operate within it. So they decided to build their own. This is why they started their own clinics, the free clinic. They started the free breakfast for the kids. They did mutual aids. They did like the grocery bags that they used to deliver for the families. They did this within their own communities because, again, they knew the system was fixed. Any of these people at any time could have taken whatever bribe was given to them, could have taken whatever offer, political offer that could have come their way, could have put on a suit, appeared a little bit more like professional or whatever. You know how they change people and make them what they want them to be. At any point in time, they could have chosen to do that and had a strong political career or whatever and been safe, but they chose not to. Assata Shakur, she chose not to. Bernie chose to play within the system. So you sit there with Andrew Schultz and you tell everybody that, yeah, the Democrats do cheat. Yeah, they're not fair. What they did to me was wrong. Yeah, they do it. Yeah, they have an oligarchy too. You say this to Andrew Schultz, but if they are doing those things, the only way that you continue to be a willing participant is if you are there to protect the system. You're not there to burn it down. You don't want the system to change. And I can tell you in my experience, reforms have never been enough. I watched education reforms. I worked in education for a long time. I watched all these different reforms come about in education, but they never completely solved the problem because they had to change the system. The reforms don't change the system. And oftentimes what I saw were more charter schools being built, and all the kids who couldn't get into the charter schools here are stuck at the under-resourced, underprivileged schools. That was their idea of reforming that system. Now, when we go back to this conversation here with Bernie Sanders, you'll also see that this reform that he is doing has no future. At least he admits it here. Not for the Democrats. Watch this.
That's what it's about. Please answer yes. Are you going to run for president?
Please answer yes. I'm 83 years of age, so that is, I think I've run my last race. But,
now, does that mean...
Zero fair races.
Does that mean that this oligarchy tour is you passing the baton?
No, don't look at it like that. The oligarchy tour is...
I think we're all looking at it like that.
No, it's not passing the baton. I happen to, I think Alexandria is great, but it's not my job to determine who the new leaders are. People have each of them, as I mentioned, in the House, there are a lot of great people. In the Senate, there's some good people. And there are people who are not in office right now.
So he tells you and makes it very clear that there's no passing of the torch. He says he likes AOC, but there's no. So this whole tour oligarchy thing is exactly what I thought it was. It's just to push back against the oligarchy within the Republican Party, not the corporatists and the billionaires within the Democratic Party. Because if he does that, then you're going outside. You have to go outside of that system and you can't play within the system. If you're going to do that, that means you're going to have to break the system and you're not going to try to reform it. This has no plan. The point is just to get you to realize, oh my God, there's corrupt billionaires in the Republican Party, while kind of being quiet about the ones in the Democratic Party. Because if you get just as loud about them, you'll have to fight the system. Both of those parties. Kind of snide there to AOC as well, because he's making it very clear there's no passing of the torch. This is not serious. People throughout time decide what's best for them, whether it's reform or revolution. I'm here to tell you right now, the state that this country is in right now is dire need for revolution, long overdue for revolution. A radical change in the system. That's the definition. And you cannot change the system if you keep people in the same said system that is working against them. And that's what Bernie Sanders exists to do. And I have to be very clear about this, and I want to drive this home. I made it very clear on Jamal Thomas's show. I want to say it again here. When you see these things from Bernie and AOC, I once upon a time believed reform was going to work too. But after you see what the Democratic Party does and you realize the DNC is a corporation and you see how the money works and these people can't even get out of the primary to become the nominee, you see that the system is fixed. So there is no reform of the Democratic Party. It's been almost 10 years since Bernie ran in 2016. Bernie Sanders, AOC, and the rest of the Democratic Party are controlled opposition. They are not true opposition to the Republican Party. If they were true opposition to the Republican Party, they would be fighting strictly for the working class. You're not fighting for the working class if you're telling people to vote for the same establishment politicians in the Democratic Party that you're telling people to push back against. These people exist to prevent a revolution. AOC and Bernie Sanders exist to prevent some type of growth within a third party movement or any type of mass movement that is going to disrupt and break this system. They don't want to break it because they benefit from it. It's safer for them that way. It's easier that way for them to do it. If you go back to what Professor Richard Wolff said when he was talking about slavery, the people who wanted to reform it and the people who wanted to abolish it. Abolishing slavery at that time was not popular, but it was the right thing to do. And what the right thing to do is now, the way that this country is headed, the way that the working class is constantly falling lower and lower. The middle class is almost completely gone in this country. The way that billionaires have taken over and run so many things, the response right now is not reform. The response right now that is needed is said revolution, is said rapid radical change. That is what is needed now. And there are different ways that that can be done. That can be done totally outside of politics as a mass movement hitting the streets, etc. Or that could be done as trying to break the duopoly through a third party, through independence, whichever path you think is best for you. But the path that we have been on, as long as I am alive, is not helping out people who are working class, is definitely damn sure has not been helping out the Black community. The time right now is for a revolution. It's not for reform. And there's a lot of comfortable people who still want you to reform because they benefit from it monetarily. There are comfortable people that have an audience capture that want you to do reform because that's what their audience is. And they can't bear to lose all the liberal simps in their audience or all the, conservative diehard like voters in their audience, because that is what is their money bag. So they need to keep telling you, push within the Democratic Party. It's been almost 10 years. These people telling you, you got to try to fight back. We got to push them. Got to put pressure on these people. How can you put pressure on a corporation that owns the politicians? How can you put pressure on politicians that are owned by AIPAC? For all the people who say third parties keep losing, they can't win, you can't beat AIPAC. I don't see you beating Kofi. I don't see you making out of a primary. The only way, in my opinion, based on what I've seen, is a path forward that's going to benefit working class people, that's going to benefit the Black community, is damn sure as hell not through the Democratic Party. It's not through the Republican Party. The path forward is going to be a movement of the people, and it's going to be the people, those of us who are at the bottom. It's going to be the 99%. We keep trying to play within the game of billionaires and corporatists, and that's easy. It's easy to do that. but it's not the right thing to do if you want change. Abraham Lincoln wasn't perfect. Again, I said the movie Lincoln was whitewashed. There's other things that they definitely should have mentioned, but Abraham Lincoln chose the abolition route. Wasn't popular. The civil rights movement at that time was not popular. And some of these people that sit back and tell their audience and tell their viewers that these people who talk about revolution are just ridiculous. Forget those people. Oh my God. They're like speaking to a small group of people, that small group of people who want to do this and da-da-da. Civil rights activists were also speaking to a small group of people because the majority of Americans didn't support it. Slavery abolitionists were speaking to a small group of people. But groups grow. I want to wrap it up with this. I thought this was pretty base from Chris Arrow. The house is burning down, and Bernie is saying, just go across the hall to another room instead of leaving the house. Wake up, people. He's telling you who he is, who the Democratic Party is. Believe him. Save yourselves. All of these people that want you to continue to do reform are fine financially, and they'll be fine 10 years from now. Will you? That leads us to the other part. I think Eric's going to come on for this.
Hey, yeah, I mean, one thing with the whole Bernie thing that is that we can't like sit around waiting for leaders. You know, we're going to need to be our own leaders. You know, we're going to need to be figuring this out on our own. And you know, one of the things that Professor Wolff said was like to don't get caught up in don't let the revolution versus reform debate like paralyze what we're doing or what people are doing. And you know what I'm doing, what we're doing with 11 demands is saying, let's cut it to the core and say the real key to this is what are our demands, right? Whether you're talking about a revolution or a strike or anything like that, or a boycott, you start with demands, right? What are the initial demands that you're working on, and then ideally the demands connect everything up. A clear set of demands has the potential to connect up what is done with a general strike, to connect up what is done with mutual aid, with protests, and what is done electorally. And you know, we're going to need to do all the things. Like we can't. It's not going to work to be doing one of these things and not the others. And so the idea of having the clear set of demands is to connect those things. And part of that has to be decorrupting our government. You know, when we look at these problems and connect the dots, right, it always comes back to what the government that's supposed to be representing us is doing, instead of you know, they were representing the billionaires and not us. So, you know, towards that, you know, if you go to 11demands.org now, there's a connection into this, and then this is the Substack version of it. We'll put the link to that in the chat. But the new concept here is the 11 Demands Pledge, and the idea is to get it to figure out how to work on the numbers, because the numbers are key. What all this comes down to is either we're going to inspire a whole bunch of people, as in the millions, to be ready to literally get in the streets to have these demands met, you know, or we're not going to get anywhere and we're going to remain tiny. And towards that, the idea is it's called the 11 Demands Collective, and the idea is to have at least an initial core group of us, you know, signed on to this idea of forming in a collective. And so if you go in through this and you get into the 11 Demands Pledge part of it, the idea is we say, as a member of the 11 Demands Collective, You pledge to educate people on the deep corruption in the system, how it crosses partisan and ideological lines. Always identify the core problem that must be addressed, the big money in politics and government. Call out our so-called representatives as the servants of the 0.1% and demand revolutionary reforms. So it's key to get to the demands, and then that gets you to the solutions and be describing the solutions as outlined. If you look in the list of demands, demand number 1 makes it pretty clear what we're talking about as far as fixing, as really fixing the system, and spread the words about 11 demands and MCDS. And MCDS is crucial, the money, corruption, demands, and solutions, because if you're calling out the money and corruption, people are going to agree with you. If this sounds good to you and you want to play a role and consider yourself part of the 11 Demands Collective, you can put your name in on this page. If you have a website URL, you can put that in. You hit the send, and you will end up on the list of members of the 11 Demands Collective. And you can join people like Sabrina and myself and JB Font. And so what I'm looking for is, what we're looking for is, to have everyone within the sound of my voice, of our voices, to sign into that. It kind of functions like a petition. It's the public face of 11 Demands Collective. And it says, these are our numbers, we're growing. These are our demands. And it's time to make something happen.
Yeah.
So that's the idea.
And no, this does not cost money.
Yeah.
This is
not about money.
No, we're not asking for no money. We're not asking for no donations to for this type of thing. I have to say that because people will ask for money for like stuff like, oh, donate. No, we don't need no donations for this. Is just to inspire people to realize what they can have. Chanel said, talk to your church members. Absolutely. Chanel is right. Please talk to members of your church, right? Like if you're a part of like Girl Scout troops or anything like that, if some of you volunteer for those types of things, like I think it's just Scouts now, whatever, talk to people, like, cause we do deserve better. And we can have better. And I think it's just, it's very clear, and I'll make sure I put the link in the chat for people too, so that they can see it. But very clear, ladies and gentlemen, I was so glad. A number of people told me about that video from Professor Richard Wolff, and I was like, oh, I know why they sent this to me.
Yeah. And demand number 11 is democratize the enterprise. That's right out of Professor Wolff's handbook about the worker co-ops and whatnot, and that's part of the 11 demands as well, is to have a vision. Let's revamp taxation, let's revamp how people work even, but we're gonna have to do it ourselves, is what this is coming to, and figure out, so this is the beginning, and let's see what we can put together and take it from here, and what comes next. I think things like 11 demands, panels and forums, will definitely be a thing for starters. We'll be talking about it probably on the Thursday call-in. If you want the Zoom call-in hangout, if you want to tell us directly what you think, you'll have your chance on Thursday.
Oh, I just realized. I have to do. I still have super chats. I'm sorry. Sorry. Let me get to those.
You get to read out the super chats.
I forgot. Thank you, Michael.
All right, well, I'm going to bow out and let you finish. And check out 11 demands to sign up, and we'll see you around.
All right. Base. Thank you, Michael. More smiles too much, which is a red flag. Everybody talking about the smiles. Thank you, Colin, for the super chat. Most Black people in the diaspora are on code enough to understand the need for reparations. Westmore is a sellout to the establishment as well as other Black people in his position. Thank you, Marlon. Give us the money first, then talk about entrepreneurship. So, right, Marlon. Thank you, Zoe. The Wire showed all of this, the best show HBO ever made. The Wire. Yeah. People used to ask me, is Baltimore really like that? And I was like, yeah. Darius said, does this count as a story? Oh, the food. LPA Film says, let me find out that Sabby is branching out into the Food Network. No. Thanks, Courtney. I'm ready to buy a Sabby Crunch Wrap ASAP. Ava said soy milk and tofu screws up your thyroid and gut. Phytic acid and phytoestrogens. That's interesting. Thank you, Roger. Lionel kicked in ding. Al Green hit with hot grits. Oh, okay. Sorry. Wrong musician. Thank you, Golden Silence. That is Matthew Russell Lee from Inner City Press. Thank you. Thank you, Marlon. If Diddy gets off, it's because of the tapes they didn't find. Oh. Darius says, I do remember Diddy saying people go missing. Tabitha says, Sabby, you should invite Nate the lawyer and Bruce Rivers to discuss Diddy's case. I don't know how to reach either one of them, but I guess I can Google it. Thank you, Wandy. How do we stop the beautiful bill? Oh, I think you're talking about the GOP bill. That one's going to be tough. Like I said, Trump is going to Congress to talk to them, so that one's going to be tough. Thank you, Courtney. If they get Dylon from making the band one to testify against Diddy, it would be wild as fuck. It would be. Dylon was funny. Thank you, Wandy. This is a distraction from genocide and Congress. Thank you, Mark. If we're this deep in the shit, we're fucking sure as hell need a radical change. Thanks, Justin. A lot of people say the Green Party is a waste of time, but it is a revolutionary party. Bernie should have joined the Green Party in 2016. We'd have Medicare for all, housing for all, and most importantly, no genocide. There you go. Thank you for this one as well. Let me finish that sentence for you, Bernie. The oligarchy tour is a grift. What'd I tell you guys? What'd I tell you? Thank you, Marlon. Declare your independence, regain your leverage. And thanks, Roger. Couldn't send on rocks, so I sent in 4 separate chats here. Thank you. All right, guys, that is it for me. I'll see you live again on Thursday evening. Have a good night, folks. Keep up the fight.